The door clicked shut. Not a rescue. A trap. Lydia Vance pressed her back against the velvet seat, heart slamming against her ribs as Duke Roderick Hale settled across from her in the dark carriage. Outside, the glittering estate faded into shadow. She'd fled her family's web only to land in another's. "You shouldn't have run," he said quietly, eyes cold as winter stone. "And you shouldn't have locked that door." "No," he agreed. "But you're worth more to me inside than out." She'd escaped one auction. Now she'd become the prize in a deadlier game. Stay with me until the end of this story. Hit that like button and drop a comment with your city so I can see how far this tale has traveled. The ballroom had been suffocating. Lydia remembered that part clearly, the way the air seemed to thicken with every passing minute, heavy with perfume and calculation. Crystal chandeliers threw fractured light across silk gowns and tailored coats, and somewhere a string quartet played something forgettable. Beautiful people saying beautiful things that meant absolutely nothing. Except tonight, everything meant something. She'd caught the glances first. Her uncle, Harrison Vance, leaning close to whisper with Lord Pemberton near the refreshment table. Her cousin Marianne touching the arm of a steel magnate whose name Lydia couldn't remember but whose fortune she definitely could. Her own mother, elegant and distant as always, watching her from across the room with an expression that might have been concern if Eleanor Vance had ever bothered with such pedestrian emotions. They were all watching her, measuring her, positioning her like a chess piece that had suddenly become more valuable than anyone had anticipated. The inheritance. Lydia's fingers tightened around her champagne flute. 3 weeks ago, her grandmother, formidable, impossible grandmother Cecilia, had died and left her entire northern estate to Lydia. Not to Harrison, who'd been circling that property like a vulture for 2 decades. Not to her father, who'd married into the Vance name and spent 30 years trying to prove he deserved it. To her, 40,000 acres of timber, mineral rights, water access, and a manor house that overlooked the disputed borderlands where 3 territories met and everyone wanted control. She was 24 years old and she'd just become the most important woman in the room, also the most disposable. "Miss Vance?" The voice came from behind her, smooth as expensive whiskey. "You look troubled." She didn't turn. "Lord Ashford, I'm perfectly fine." "Of course you are." He moved into her peripheral vision, silver-haired and sharp-eyed, one of her father's oldest friends. "I merely wanted to express my condolences again. Your grandmother was a remarkable woman." "She was a nightmare," Lydia said flatly. "But thank you." Ashford's laugh was genuine, which almost made her like him. Almost. "She would have appreciated your honesty. She also would have wanted you protected." There it was. "Protected," Lydia repeated, finally meeting his gaze. "From what, exactly?" "From making decisions in haste." His smile didn't reach his eyes. "You're young. Brilliant, certainly. Your grandmother wouldn't have chosen you otherwise, but inexperienced. The northern estate requires delicate management, alliances, experience." "A husband, you mean?" "I didn't say that." "You didn't have to." She set down her champagne and walked away before he could respond. Her hands were shaking. She hated that they were shaking. The powder room was mercifully empty. Lydia gripped the marble sink and stared at her reflection, dark hair swept up in an elaborate style that had taken her maid an hour to perfect, green eyes that looked too bright, too sharp. She looked like her grandmother. Everyone said so. Same stubborn chin, same mouth that smiled rarely and meant it even less. Same refusal to be anyone's pawn. The door opened behind her. Marianne swept in, golden and perfect as always, her smile practiced and deadly. "There you are," her cousin said brightly. "Mother's been looking for you." "I'm sure she has." "Don't be like that." Marianne checked her own reflection, smoothing invisible wrinkles from her rose-colored gown. "We're all just worried about you. This inheritance, it's a tremendous burden. Uncle Harrison thinks—" "I don't care what Uncle Harrison thinks." Marianne's smile tightened. "You should. He's only trying to help." "Help himself to my property, you mean?" "Lydia." Her cousin's voice dropped, losing its sweetness. "You can't possibly think you can manage that estate alone. You've never even been there. You have no experience with men trying to take what's mine. I'm getting plenty of experience tonight." She pushed past Marianne and back into the hallway. The music swelled. They'd moved on to something livelier, a waltz that made the ballroom feel even more claustrophobic. She needed air. She needed space. She needed to think. The garden doors stood open at the far end of the hall, promising cool night air and temporary escape. Lydia headed toward them, ignoring the looks that followed her, the whispered conversations that paused as she passed. She'd almost made it when her father intercepted her. "Lydia." Marcus Vance caught her elbow gently but firmly. "A word." "I'm not interested in words tonight, Father." Nevertheless. He steered her toward a quiet alcove, away from curious eyes. Up close, he looked tired, strained. "Your uncle has made a very generous proposal." Her stomach dropped. "No." "You haven't heard it yet." "I don't need to. The answer is no." Marcus's jaw tightened. "He's suggesting a partnership. You retain ownership of the estate, but he manages it while taking how much of the profits? 40%, 50? 30. And in exchange, you'd have his protection, his connections, his control." Lydia pulled her arm free. "I'm not a child who needs a guardian, and I'm not signing away a third of my inheritance to a man who's been trying to steal it for 20 years. He's family. That makes it worse, not better." Her father's expression hardened. "You're being naive. That estate sits on a powder keg. 3 territorial claims, 2 railway companies fighting for access, and mining interests that would kill to control those mineral rights. You think you can navigate that alone? I think I can hire people who aren't trying to rob me. And you think you can trust hired help more than your own blood?" The laugh that escaped her was bitter. "Right now? Absolutely." She walked away before he could stop her again, her heart pounding so hard she thought it might crack her ribs. The garden doors were closer now, just a few more steps. "Miss Vance." This voice was new, low and cool and carrying an edge that made her stop despite herself. She turned. The man standing 3 paces away wore black, perfectly tailored, deliberately simple, expensive in a way that didn't need to announce itself. Dark hair, darker eyes, a face that would have been handsome if it weren't so carefully controlled. She knew him. Everyone knew him. Duke Roderick Hale, her grandmother's ally, her uncle's enemy, the man who'd been promised her hand in marriage 6 years ago in an alliance that had collapsed so spectacularly that people still gossiped about it at parties. "Your Grace," she said carefully, "I wasn't aware you'd been invited." "I wasn't." His mouth curved slightly. "Your uncle made that very clear, but your grandmother had an interesting clause in her will, something about ensuring you had access to all relevant counsel before making major decisions. My lawyers insist that includes me." "How convenient for your lawyers." "Isn't it?" He moved closer, and she caught the scent of tobacco and something darker, wilder. "You're planning to run." It wasn't a question. Lydia's fingers curled into her skirts. "I'm planning to get some air." "Through the garden, to the side gate, where you've arranged for a carriage." Those dark eyes missed nothing. "Your maid talked to my valet. Apparently they're old friends." Damn. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Yes, you do." Roderick glanced toward the ballroom, where her uncle was now deep in conversation with 2 men Lydia didn't recognize. "Harrison's brought reinforcements tonight, Pemberton and his son. They're going to propose a marriage between you and young William Pemberton. Very public, very difficult to refuse without causing a scene." Her blood went cold. "William Pemberton is an idiot. An idiot whose father controls half the railway access to your estate. An idiot who'll do exactly what he's told." Roderick's gaze returned to her. "Which is why Harrison chose him." "And you're telling me this out of the goodness of your heart?" "I'm telling you this because you have approximately 10 minutes before they corner you. After that, refusing becomes complicated." Lydia's mind raced. William Pemberton. The railway magnate's vapid, obedient son who'd spent the entire previous summer following her around like a puppy until she'd finally told him to find someone who might actually return his affection. Harrison must have been planning this for weeks. Months, maybe. "So what do you want?" she asked quietly. "What's your price for this information?" Something flickered in Roderick's expression, surprise maybe, or approval. "Smart. You assume everyone wants something." "Everyone does." "True." He pulled a card from his jacket, offered it to her. "There's a carriage waiting. Black horses, red wheels. It'll take you to my estate, where you can think without your family breathing down your neck." She stared at the card without taking it. And then what? And then you decide what you want to do. With full information, without pressure. His smile was thin and sharp. Unlike your family, I prefer my allies to choose me willingly. They're more reliable that way. You want me as an ally. I want you to not become Harrison's puppet, whether that makes us allies or simply enemies of a common enemy. He shrugged. We can negotiate details later. Across the room, Harrison had spotted them. His expression changed, darkened. He started moving toward them, Pemberton and his idiot son in tow. 5 minutes now, Roderick murmured. Choose fast, Miss Vance. It's the last free choice you'll make tonight if you stay. Lydia looked at the card, at Roderick, at her uncle bearing down on them with a smile that promised nothing good. She took the card. Where? Servants' entrance, east corridor, past the kitchens. The door will be unlocked. And if this is a trap, then you'll be trapped either way. At least my prison has better wine. He walked away before she could respond, disappearing into the crowd with the easy confidence of someone who'd never doubted his right to be anywhere. Harrison was closer now, close enough that she could see the calculation in his eyes. Lydia made her decision. She smiled at her uncle, bright and false. Uncle Harrison, I was just getting some air. Of course, my dear. He took her hand, patted it like she was a child. But first, I wanted to introduce you to some friends. Lord Pemberton, you remember, and his son William. William Pemberton stepped forward, flushed and eager. Miss Vance, you look lovely tonight. Thank you. Harrison's grip on her hand tightened slightly. William was just telling me about his plans to expand the Western Railway. Fascinating work. I thought you two might enjoy discussing it, perhaps over a private supper next week. The trap was closing. Lydia could feel it. The weight of expectation, the pressure of propriety, the social machinery grinding into motion around her. Accept the supper. Accept the courtship. Accept the proposal that would follow within months, the marriage that would dissolve her inheritance into Harrison's control. That sounds lovely, she heard herself say, but I'm afraid I'm feeling rather unwell. The heat, you know. I think I need to lie down. Concern flooded Harrison's face, so practiced it almost looked real. Of course. Let me escort you. No need, I'll just slip away quietly. I wouldn't want to disrupt the party. She pulled her hand free and walked, not too fast, not too slow, toward the hallway that led to the servants' quarters. Behind her, she could hear Harrison's frustrated murmur, could feel his suspicion like a physical weight. She didn't look back. The east corridor was darker, quieter. The sounds of the party faded behind her, replaced by the distant clatter of kitchens and servants moving through their endless routines. Lydia found the door Roderick had mentioned, plain wood, unremarkable, exactly the kind of exit that important people forgot existed. It opened under her hand. Night air hit her face, cool and sharp. The garden on this side was wilder, less manicured, and there, just beyond the gate, was the carriage. Black horses, red wheels, a trap, or a rescue. Maybe both. Lydia ran. She reached the carriage just as shouts erupted behind her, Harrison's voice tight with fury. Someone had noticed her absence. The coachman, an older man with a scarred face and steady hands, didn't ask questions. He simply opened the door. Lydia climbed inside. The interior was dark, plush, expensive. She collapsed onto the seat, her breath coming hard, her heart racing. She'd done it. She'd actually... Someone moved in the shadows across from her. Lydia's scream caught in her throat as Roderick Hale leaned forward into the dim light filtering through the window. He'd been waiting, inside the carriage, the whole time. What? She started. He reached past her and locked the door. The click was very loud in the confined space. What are you doing? Lydia demanded, anger flooding through her shock. I said the carriage would take you somewhere you could think. Roderick settled back into his seat as the horses lurched into motion. I never said I wouldn't be there. Let me out. No. The single word was flat, final. Lydia lunged for the door handle, locked. She turned on him, fury replacing fear. Open this door right now or I'll... You'll what? His voice remained calm, almost gentle. Scream. We're already past the estate gates. Jump? At this speed, you'd break your neck. Face it, Miss Vance. You chose my carriage over your family's trap. Now you get to live with that choice. You lied to me. No, I omitted. There's a difference. He pulled a small decanter from a hidden compartment, poured amber liquid into 2 glasses, offered her one. Drink. You look like you need it. She slapped the glass out of his hand. It shattered against the opposite wall, whiskey running down the velvet upholstery in dark streams. Roderick looked at the damage, then at her, then calmly drank from his own glass. Feel better? He asked. Go to hell. Already there. Welcome to the neighborhood. He set down his empty glass. Now, we can do this the easy way or the hard way. Easy way. You sit, you listen, and when we arrive at my estate, you decide whether to stay or go. Hard way. You make a scene. I restrain you, and we have the same conversation, but you're angry, and I'm annoyed, and it's all very tedious. Lydia stayed standing, gripping the handrail as the carriage swayed. Why should I believe anything you say? Because, unlike your family, I'm being honest about my dishonesty. He leaned forward, elbows on knees. Your uncle wants your estate. Your father wants to keep the peace. Your cousin wants whatever her mother tells her to want. Everyone at that party tonight had an agenda, including me. What's yours? Survival. The word was sharp, stripped of pretense. Your grandmother and I had an arrangement. She controlled access to the northern waterways. I controlled the southern trade routes. Together, we kept Harrison and his friends from monopolizing the entire territory. And now she's dead. And now you own the piece that completes the puzzle. Roderick's expression hardened. Which means every vulture in 3 territories is going to descend on you. Harrison's just the first. There'll be others, marriage proposals, business partnerships, legal challenges, maybe worse. Worse? Your grandmother didn't die in her sleep, Miss Vance. The words landed like a punch. Lydia sank onto the seat without meaning to, her legs suddenly unsteady. What? The official story is heart failure, natural causes. She was 83, so everyone believed it. Roderick pulled a folder from beneath his seat, handed it to her. My physician examined the body before burial, found traces of digitalis poisoning, slow, careful, almost undetectable. Lydia's hand shook as she opened the folder. Medical reports, chemical analyses, testimony from servants about her grandmother's final weeks. The fatigue, the confusion, the gradual decline everyone had attributed to age. Who? The word came out as a whisper. I don't know, yet. Roderick watched her with those dark, unreadable eyes. But the timing is interesting, isn't it? She dies just as the territorial negotiations were reaching a critical point. You inherit. Harrison swoops in with his helpful proposals. Very convenient. You're saying my uncle killed her? I'm saying someone did, and that same someone will come for you if you let them get close enough. He took the folder back, tucked it away. So yes, I kidnapped you. Yes, I'm using you as leverage in my own games, but I'm also keeping you alive long enough to figure out who's trying to kill you and why. The carriage rattled over rough road. Outside, the city lights were fading, replaced by dark countryside. Lydia tried to process everything, the poison, the implications, the fact that she was trapped in a carriage with a man she barely knew who just admitted to kidnapping her. I could have hired guards, she said finally. Investigators. I didn't need you. Could you? Roderick's smile was cold. With what money? Your grandmother's estate is yours, but it's tied up in trusts and legal requirements until you marry or turn 30. Until then, you have an allowance. Generous, certainly, but not enough to mount a serious defense against people with real power. She hadn't known that, hadn't thought to ask, hadn't realized. The marriage clause, she breathed. That's why everyone's pushing so hard. Exactly. Marry the right person, and you unlock immediate access to 40,000 acres and everything on it. Marry the wrong person. He shrugged. Well, Harrison's very good at writing prenuptial agreements. Lydia's mind raced through possibilities, calculating angles. So your plan is what? Keep me prisoner until I agree to marry you instead? No. The answer was immediate, definite. I told you, I prefer willing allies. Coerced loyalty is brittle. It breaks when you need it most. Then what do you want? Roderick leaned back, shadows crossing his face. I want you to see the board you're playing on. All the pieces, all the players. Then I want you to make an informed choice about who you trust. He paused. If that's me, excellent. We resurrect the old alliance, combine our territories, and become powerful enough that Harrison and his friends can't touch us. If it's not me, well, at least you'll know what you're walking into. And if I choose neither, if I want to stand alone, then you die. He said it matter-of-factly, without drama. Maybe not immediately, maybe not obviously, but someone will get to you, through marriage or money, or a quiet accident on a dark road. You're too valuable and too vulnerable. Alone, you're not a player, you're a prize. The words stung because they were true. Lydia had spent the last 3 weeks trying to convince herself she could handle this, could navigate the politics and power games on her own. But she was starting to realize just how deep the water was, how many sharks circled beneath the surface. "I need time," she said quietly, "to think, to verify what you've told me." "You'll have it. My estate is 3 hours from the city. You can stay as long as you need, days, weeks, whatever it takes. I'll provide access to documents, witnesses, whatever evidence you require." Roderick's voice softened slightly. "But understand this, Miss Vance. Time is a luxury. Every day you delay is another day your enemies get stronger, another day they dig in deeper. Eventually you'll run out of room to maneuver." "Is that a threat?" "It's a fact." He pulled out a pocket watch, checked it. "By now, Harrison knows you're gone. By morning, he'll know you're with me. Within 3 days, he'll make his counter-move. Legal action, public accusations, something to force your hand. The game's already started, whether you're ready or not." Lydia stared out the window at the passing darkness. Somewhere behind them was the glittering ballroom, the smiling faces, the elegant trap her family had laid. Ahead was, what? Another trap? A genuine alliance? Something worse? "Tell me about the original arrangement," she said. "The marriage alliance that fell apart. I was 18. I remember being told it was off, but never why." Roderick's expression went carefully blank. "Your grandmother didn't tell you. She said it was complicated, that sometimes things don't work out as planned." "That's one way to put it." He poured himself another drink, took his time with it. "The truth is simpler and uglier. Your uncle found out about the arrangement before it was finalized. He went to your father, convinced him it was a bad deal, that I was using you to gain control of Vance Holdings. Your father panicked, backed out. Harrison swooped in with alternative proposals. The alliance collapsed. And you blame my father?" "I blame Harrison for being a manipulative bastard. I blame your father for being weak enough to believe him." His gaze met hers. "I don't blame you. You were a pawn then, same as now. Difference is, now you know it." The carriage slowed, turning onto a narrow road lined with old trees. Lydia could see lights ahead, a manor house, substantial but not ostentatious. Roderick's estate. "Last chance," he said quietly. "When we stop, that door unlocks. You can run if you want. I won't chase you." "And go where?" "Anywhere. Back to the city. To friends. If you have any your family hasn't already compromised. To some small town where you disappear and hope they forget about you." He stood as the carriage rolled to a stop, moved to the door. "Or you can come inside, look at the evidence, and decide if I'm lying. Your choice, Miss Vance. It's always been your choice. You just didn't know you were allowed to make it." He opened the door. Cool night air rushed in, carrying the scent of pine and distant rain. Outside, staff waited at a respectful distance, a housekeeper, a butler, several footmen. All professional, all carefully not staring. Roderick stepped out, offered his hand. Lydia looked at it. At him. At the house that could be sanctuary or prison. At the darkness beyond that promised nothing but more running, more fear, more uncertainty. She thought about her grandmother. Formidable, impossible Cecilia, who'd somehow thought Lydia was strong enough for this. Who'd left her an inheritance that was equal parts gift and curse. Who'd maybe been murdered for trying to protect something that mattered. She thought about Harrison's smile, her father's weakness, William Pemberton's eager, empty face. She thought about being 24 years old and worth 40,000 acres to everyone except herself. Lydia took Roderick's hand and stepped out of the carriage. 3 days, she said. You have 3 days to convince me you're not just another version of my uncle. His smile was sharp and genuine. 3 days to prove I'm worse, you mean, but more honest about it. That too. He led her toward the house, and Lydia didn't look back at the carriage, at the road that led back to the city, at the life she'd just abandoned or chosen or stumbled into. Behind them, the horses stamped and snorted. Someone closed the carriage door with a soft click that sounded, in the dark and quiet, exactly like a lock engaging. The house swallowed her whole. That's what it felt like anyway, stepping through those heavy oak doors into an entrance hall that seemed designed to remind visitors exactly how small they were. Dark wood paneling climbed toward vaulted ceilings, portraits of severe-looking ancestors glared down from gilt frames, and somewhere in the depths of the house a clock struck midnight with deep, resonant chimes that felt like a countdown to something inevitable. The housekeeper, Mrs. Thorne, she'd introduced herself as 50-something and efficient, led Lydia up a wide staircase without much conversation. Roderick had disappeared almost immediately, muttering something about business that couldn't wait, leaving Lydia to wonder if that was strategy or genuine indifference. Either way, she was alone now. "Your rooms, Miss Vance," Mrs. Thorne said, opening a door on the second floor. "I've had a bath drawn and a cold supper laid out. His Grace thought you might prefer privacy tonight." "His Grace thinks a lot of things," Lydia muttered, stepping inside. The rooms were beautiful, she'd give him that. A sitting area with books and a fireplace already burning low. A bedroom beyond with a four-poster bed that looked older than her entire family line. Windows overlooking dark gardens. Everything tasteful, expensive, and completely foreign. Mrs. Thorne paused at the door. "The house is yours to explore, miss. We keep country hours here, breakfast at 7, but there's always something available in the kitchen if you need it. His Grace's study is on the ground floor, east wing. He asked that you join him there tomorrow morning at 9. Asked or commanded? The older woman's mouth twitched, almost a smile. "With His Grace, there's rarely a difference. Sleep well, miss." She closed the door softly, and Lydia was alone. She moved to the window first, testing it. Unlocked. 2 stories up, but there was a trellis and the roof of the conservatory below. Escapable, if it came to that. Good to know. The bath was still hot, scented with something herbal that she didn't recognize. Lydia sank into it and tried to organize her thoughts into something resembling a plan. 3 days. She had 3 days to figure out if Roderick was telling the truth about the poison, about Harrison, about any of it. 3 days to decide if she was safer here or back in the city fighting her battles alone. 3 days to figure out who the hell she could trust in a world where everyone seemed to want something from her. She was still thinking about it an hour later, lying in the unfamiliar bed and staring at shadows on the ceiling, when she heard the voices. Low, angry, coming from somewhere below her window. Lydia slipped out of bed, grabbed the robe Mrs. Thorne had left, and moved to the window. The garden was dark, but there, near the south entrance, 2 figures stood in a pool of lamplight. She couldn't make out faces, but the body language was clear. An argument. One tall and rigid, Roderick probably. The other shorter, gesturing sharply. She cracked the window open. "Telling you it's a mistake," the shorter figure was saying. A woman's voice, refined but strained. "Bringing her here exposes us to..." "To what? Scrutiny we're already under?" Roderick's voice was cold. "Harrison knows where she is by now. Everyone knows." "Exactly. So why provoke?" "Because sitting back and waiting for him to make the first move is how we lose." He turned, and Lydia caught a glimpse of his profile, sharp in the lamplight. "She's leverage, the only leverage that matters. Leverage you can't control." "I don't need to control her. I need her to see that everyone else is worse." The woman laughed, bitter and sharp. "And you think that'll work? You think she's stupid enough to fall for..." "I think she's smart enough to recognize a genuine threat when she sees one." Roderick's voice dropped lower. "Unlike some people." The woman stepped closer, into the light. She was beautiful, dark hair, pale skin, wearing riding clothes despite the late hour. "Careful, Roderick. You're betting everything on a girl who doesn't know you, doesn't trust you, and has every reason to run back to her family the moment she gets scared." "Then I'd better make sure I'm scarier than they are." "You're not." The words hung in the night air. Roderick went very still. "Meaning?" he asked quietly. "Meaning Harrison has resources you don't. Allies you can't match, and he's willing to do things you're still too principled to consider." The woman's voice gentled slightly. "I'm trying to help you, but you're making this harder than it needs to be." "By keeping her alive?" "By pretending you care whether she lives or dies. She's a tool, Roderick. Use her or lose her, but don't start believing your own performance." Lydia's hands tightened on the windowsill. She should have felt shocked, betrayed. Instead, she felt oddly vindicated. At least this woman was being honest about her dishonesty. Roderick turned away from the woman, started walking back toward the house. "Go home, Catherine. Your concern is noted and dismissed. Stubborn bastard. Runs in the family." Catherine, whoever she was, watched him go, then disappeared into the darkness beyond the garden. Lydia stayed at the window for a long time after, thinking. Leverage, tool, use her or lose her. Well, at least she knew where she stood. She climbed back into bed and stared at the ceiling until exhaustion finally dragged her under. Her dreams were full of locked doors and disappearing staircases, and somewhere in the distance, her grandmother's voice saying something important that Lydia couldn't quite hear. She woke to someone knocking. "Miss Vance? It's 8:30. His Grace is expecting you." Lydia groaned into her pillow. Apparently privacy didn't extend to sleeping late. She dragged herself up, found clothes laid out. Her own clothes, which meant someone had retrieved her things from the city overnight. Efficient. Also vaguely alarming. She dressed quickly, splashed water on her face, and tried to look like someone who hadn't spent half the night eavesdropping on conversations she wasn't meant to hear. The study was easy to find. Just follow the sound of papers rustling and quiet cursing. She knocked once and entered without waiting for permission. Roderick looked up from a desk covered in documents, letters, maps. He looked tired, she noticed, like he hadn't slept either. "Miss Vance, punctual. I appreciate that. You said 9. It's 8:40. "Close enough." He gestured to a chair across from him. "Coffee? Mrs. Thorne makes it strong enough to wake the dead." Is that supposed to be reassuring? His mouth quirked. "Depends on your relationship with the dead." Lydia sat and accepted the coffee he poured. It was, as promised, strong enough to strip paint. She took a long drink and felt her brain start functioning. "So," she said, "are we going to talk about what I heard last night?" Roderick's hand paused over the papers. "You were listening. Your garden conversations aren't as private as you think." She set down the cup. "Who's Catherine?" "My cousin. She manages the southern estates." He met her gaze directly. "And she's right, by the way. About most of it. You are leverage. I am using you. The question isn't whether that's true. The question is whether you're smart enough to use me right back." The honesty was almost jarring. Lydia had expected denials, explanations, careful manipulation. Instead, he was just admitting it. "And if I decide you're not worth using," she asked, "then you walk away. But you should know what you're walking away from first." He pushed a stack of papers across the desk. "These are the territorial claims on your grandmother's estate. 3 different entities, all with legal arguments that range from dubious to completely fabricated. Harrison's backing 2 of them." Lydia picked up the first document. Dense legal language, official seals, demands for access to survey the land and verify mineral rights. He can't possibly think this will hold up in court. He doesn't need it to hold up, he just needs it to delay. Roderick pulled out a map, spread it across the desk. "Look, your estate sits here. Harrison controls everything to the west through various proxies and shell companies. I control the south. The east is disputed territory, 3 mining operations fighting over the same seam of silver. The north is wilderness, but there's a pass that connects to the trade routes." He traced lines on his map as he talked, and Lydia started to see it. The web of control, the strategic importance, the reason everyone wanted a piece. "Whoever controls your land controls access to all of it," she said slowly. "The water, the pass, the routes between territories." Exactly. Your grandmother understood that. It's why she held out for so long, why she refused every offer Harrison made. Roderick's expression darkened. "It's also why someone killed her." "You keep saying that like it's proven. All I saw last night was a medical report that could mean anything." "Then look at these." He pulled out more papers, financial records, correspondence, a timeline of events. 6 months ago, Harrison started moving assets, liquidating holdings in the east, consolidating power in the west. 3 months ago, he approached your grandmother with a final offer, partnership or nothing. She refused. 2 months ago, she started getting sick. Lydia scanned the documents. The timing was suspicious. She'd give him that. But timing wasn't proof. "This could all be coincidence," she argued. "People get sick. Old people die. You're building a conspiracy out of what? Paranoia?" Roderick leaned back in his chair. "Maybe. But explain this. He pulled out a letter, handwritten. Your grandmother sent this to me 3 weeks before she died. Read it. Lydia took the letter carefully. The handwriting was shaky but unmistakable. Her grandmother's aggressive scrawl, the same writing that had filled stern birthday cards and sternly worded advice throughout Lydia's childhood. Roderick, something's wrong. I can feel it in my bones, in my gut, in the way servants won't meet my eyes anymore. Someone's got into my household. I don't know who. I don't know how far it goes. If something happens to me, protect the girl. Not because she's mine, because she's the only one who might be stubborn enough to stand up to Harrison. You'll need her. She'll need you. Don't waste time mourning me. Just keep her alive long enough to fight. And Roderick? Don't trust anyone, not even family, especially not family. See. Lydia read it twice, 3 times. Her hands were shaking. She set the letter down carefully. She knew, she whispered. She knew someone was trying to kill her, and she didn't. Why didn't she go to the authorities? Why didn't she? Because Harrison has friends in the authorities. Judges, police commissioners, prosecutors. Roderick's voice was gentle now. Your grandmother was brilliant, but she was also isolated. By the time she realized how deep the corruption went, it was too late to fight it directly. So she left it to me. Lydia laughed, and it came out harsh and broken. Fantastic. No pressure or anything. She left it to someone she trusted to be smarter than her enemies expected, someone young enough to be underestimated and stubborn enough to not care. He paused. Was she wrong? Lydia stared at the map, at the careful notations marking territory and influence and power, at the letter with its desperate warning, at the evidence piled around her like walls closing in. I need to see the estate, she said finally, the actual property. I need to understand what I'm fighting for. Agreed. I'll arrange today, now. She stood up, decision crystallizing into action. If Harrison's making moves, I need to move faster. I need to see it with my own eyes before he finds a way to take it from me. Roderick studied her for a long moment. It's a full day's ride, rough country, and if Harrison has people watching, then they'll see me claiming what's mine instead of hiding in your study. Lydia met his gaze. You said I needed to see the board. Fine. Show me. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, maybe, or respect. You're not what I expected. Good. That makes 2 of us. He stood, started gathering papers. We'll need supplies, guards. I'll have Mrs. Thorne. No guards. Lydia surprised herself with the certainty. Just you and me. Fewer people means fewer chances for information to leak to Harrison. It also means fewer people to protect you if something goes wrong. You keep saying you want me to trust you. Here's your chance to prove it's not just talk. Roderick's smile was sharp and genuine. You know, I'm starting to see why your grandmother liked you. She didn't like anyone, she just tolerated some people slightly more than others. Even better. They left within the hour, on horseback because it was faster than a carriage through the rough northern terrain. Lydia hadn't ridden in months, but the muscle memory came back quickly enough. The rhythm of the horse beneath her, the way the world looked different from this height. Roderick led them along roads that gradually gave way to paths, then to game trails cutting through dense forest. He didn't talk much, which Lydia appreciated. She needed time to think, to process everything she'd learned. But around midday, when they stopped to water the horses at a creek, she broke the silence. Who was she? The woman you were supposed to marry before my family pulled out. Roderick looked up from checking his horse's hooves. Excuse me? The alliance 6 years ago. It was a marriage arrangement. My grandmother told me that much. Was there someone else? Is that why you didn't fight harder when it fell apart? He was quiet for so long she thought he wouldn't answer. Then, no, there was no one else. Then why let it go so easily? Because your father made it clear you didn't want it, that you were being forced. He met her eyes. I told you, I don't want unwilling allies. That goes double for unwilling wives. I was 18. I didn't know what I wanted. Exactly. You were a child being bartered between adults. Whatever Harrison's faults, he was right about one thing. I was using you to gain access to Vance Holdings. It wasn't personal. It was strategy. The honesty stung. Lydia turned away, pretending to examine the creek. And now? Now you're not a child. Now you know exactly what's being asked of you and why. If we rebuild that alliance, It'll be because you chose it, not because someone forced you. He paused. Does that bother you? That you're being honest? No. It's a nice change. She turned back to him. But I need to know, is marriage still part of the plan? Because that clause in the will could be satisfied by marrying anyone. Doesn't have to be me. Roderick's expression was unreadable. But yes, eventually you'll need to marry someone if you want full control. The question is whether you choose a partner who'll respect your authority or one who'll try to take it. And you'd respect it? I'd demand it. Anything less makes you useless to me. It was, Lydia realized, the most romantic thing anyone had said to her in years. Not because it was sweet, it wasn't, but because it was real. They rode in silence after that, pushing deeper into territory Lydia had never seen. The land changed gradually, civilized roads giving way to wild country, farms becoming scattered homesteads, then nothing but forest and rock and the occasional glimpse of mountains in the distance. And then, as the sun started its descent toward the horizon, they crested a ridge and Lydia saw it. Her inheritance. The valley spread out below them like something from a painting, dense forest giving way to cleared land, a river cutting silver through the center, and there, overlooking everything, the manor house. 3 stories of stone and timber, wings sprawling in different directions like it had grown organically over generations. Smoke rose from several chimneys. Lights glowed in windows despite the early hour. Someone was living there. "Who's in my house?" Lydia demanded. Roderick's expression had gone carefully neutral. "Caretakers. Your grandmother employed a full staff. They've been keeping the place running since she died. And you didn't think to mention this? I'm mentioning it now." He urged his horse forward. "Come on. There's someone you need to meet." They rode down into the valley, and Lydia felt the weight of it settling on her shoulders. The sheer size of the estate, the responsibility, the impossible task of defending all of this against people with more experience and fewer scruples. The staff were waiting when they arrived. A small group clustered near the main entrance, clearly alerted to their approach. An older man stepped forward, silver-haired and straight-backed despite his years. "Your Grace," he said to Roderick, then turned to Lydia. "Miss Vance, welcome home." The words hit her strangely. Home. This place she'd never seen, left to her by a woman who'd barely tolerated her existence. "Thank you," she managed. "You are?" "Charles Wickham. I served as your grandmother's steward for 40 years. I hope to serve you just as long." His eyes were shrewd, assessing. "Though circumstances are rather different now. That's a polite way to put it." Lydia dismounted, gratefully accepting help from a young stable hand. Her legs were shaking from the long ride. "I need to see everything. The accounts, the property boundaries, the staff roster. Everything." Wickham's eyebrows rose slightly. "Tonight, miss? You must be exhausted from the journey." "Tomorrow, then. First thing?" She turned to Roderick. "You're staying. Unless you're planning to ride back in the dark, we're both staying." He was already heading toward the house, clearly familiar with the layout. "Wickham, we'll need rooms prepared, and dinner, and a full report on everything that's happened since Lady Cecilia's death." The steward bowed slightly. "Of course, Your Grace, though perhaps Miss Vance would prefer to give her own orders in her own house." It was gentle, that rebuke, but unmistakable. Lydia felt a flash of gratitude toward this man she'd just met. "Yes," she said firmly. "I would. Wickham, please prepare 2 guest rooms, separate wings, dinner at 7, and I'll want that report from you directly, not through His Grace." Roderick's smile was brief but approving. "Well trained already. Your grandmother would be proud." They were shown to their rooms, Lydia's in the east wing, spacious and clearly her grandmother's personal suite. Someone had already unpacked the few belongings she'd brought, laid out fresh clothes, drawn a bath. Lydia sank into the water and tried not to think about how easily she could get used to this. The comfort, the staff attending to her needs, the sense of belonging somewhere. Dangerous thoughts. This place was a target, and she was just learning how to be the archer instead of the arrow. Dinner was tense. Wickham presented his report over roasted chicken and vegetables from the estate's own gardens. Production numbers, staff concerns, maintenance issues, the dozen small crises that had piled up in the 3 weeks since her grandmother's death. "And the claims?" Lydia asked, pushing food around her plate. "The legal challenges Roderick mentioned?" Wickham's expression darkened. 3 separate parties have sent surveyors onto the property without permission. I've turned them away, but they keep returning. One became insistent. We had to involve the local constable. Who did nothing, Roderick added from across the table. Because the constable is Harrison's cousin. Of course he is. Lydia set down her fork. Is there anyone in this territory Harrison doesn't have in his pocket? A few. Mostly people too stubborn or too poor to be worth bribing. Roderick paused. There's also Caleb Thorne. The name landed like a stone in still water. Lydia's hand froze halfway to her wine glass. What did you say? Caleb Thorne. He owns the neighboring property to the east. Smaller holding, but strategic location. Your grandmother tried to buy him out for years. He refused every offer. Roderick was watching her carefully. You know him. It wasn't a question. Lydia forced herself to pick up the glass, take a sip. We were acquainted, years ago. Acquainted. His tone suggested he knew it was more than that. He's been making noise since your inheritance became public. Claims he has historical rights to some of the water access. That's ridiculous. The water rights were settled decades ago. Settled in your grandmother's favor, yes. Thorne's arguing the original agreement was obtained under duress. Roderick leaned back in his chair. Harrison's backing his claim, financially and legally. Of course he was. Lydia felt something cold settle in her stomach. When did this start? 2 weeks ago, right after your grandmother's funeral. 2 weeks. Caleb had waited 2 weeks after she'd inherited to ally himself with her worst enemy. She wanted to be surprised, wanted to feel betrayed. Instead, she just felt tired. I need to talk to him, she said quietly. Bad idea. Roderick's voice was sharp. He's compromised. Whatever you had with him before is exactly why I need to talk to him. Lydia met his gaze. If there's any chance he's being coerced rather than bought, I need to know. And I'm the only one who can find out. Or he's completely sold out and you're walking into a trap. Then come with me. Watch from a distance, but I'm going. Wickham cleared his throat delicately. If I may, miss. Mr. Thorne has requested a meeting several times. I've been turning him away on his Grace's instructions, but Lydia shot Roderick a look. You've been screening my correspondence? I've been keeping you alive. There's a difference. Not to me, there isn't. She turned to Wickham. Accept the meeting, tomorrow. Neutral ground, the old mill at the property boundary. Noon. Miss Vance, Roderick started. It's not a request. She stood, suddenly exhausted. This is my estate, my decision. You want me to be an ally instead of a pawn? Then stop trying to control every move I make. She walked out before he could respond, half expecting him to follow. He didn't. Good. She needed space to think, to process, to figure out what the hell she was going to say to Caleb Thorne after 3 years of silence. Her room felt too large, too empty. Lydia stood at the window looking out over her inheritance, the dark valley, the river glinting in moonlight, the forest stretching away toward territories she'd never seen. Somewhere out there, Harrison was planning his next move. Somewhere closer, Caleb was waiting to meet her. And somewhere in this house, Roderick was probably plotting how to turn this mess to his advantage. Everyone wanted something from her. The question was what she wanted for herself. She was still thinking about it when someone knocked on her door, soft, hesitant. Come in, she called. A young woman entered, maybe 20, dark hair and nervous eyes. Miss Vance, I'm Sarah. I was your grandmother's personal maid. Mr. Wickham thought, if you need anything, thank you, Sarah. I'm fine for tonight. The girl didn't leave. She stood there, twisting her hands, clearly working up courage for something. What is it? Lydia asked more gently. It's just your grandmother. In those last weeks, she said things about being watched, about not trusting anyone from the main house. Sarah's voice dropped to a whisper. She made me promise to tell you something if anything happened to her. Lydia's pulse quickened. What? She said to check the study, behind the portrait of the first Duke. She said you'd know what to look for. Did she say what I'd find? No, miss. Just that it was important, that it would prove... Sarah trailed off, frightened. Prove what? That she was right. About everything. The girl fled before Lydia could ask anything else, leaving her alone with this new puzzle. Behind the portrait, what to look for? Lydia waited until his house went quiet, until she heard Roderick's door close down the hall and Wickham dismissed the last of the servants for the night. Then she slipped out of her room, barefoot and carrying a single candle, and made her way through dark hallways to the study. The portrait was easy to find. It dominated the north wall, 6 feet tall and imposing. Some ancestor with her grandmother's stubborn chin and disapproving expression. Lydia set down the candle and examined the frame, the wall around it, looking for anything unusual. There, a slight gap between frame and wall on the left side. She pressed, and something clicked. The portrait swung outward on hidden hinges, revealing a small safe built into the wall behind it. Lydia's hands were shaking as she tried to work out the combination. Numbers that meant something to her grandmother. She tried birth dates, anniversaries, important years. Nothing worked. Then, on impulse, she tried the year the estate had been founded. The numbers her grandmother had mentioned constantly, proudly. The safe opened. Inside were documents, letters, and a ledger filled with her grandmother's handwriting, names, dates, amounts of money, bribes paid, threats made, a record of every corrupt official, every bought alliance, every dirty deal Harrison had made over the past decade. Evidence. Real, documented, damning evidence. Lydia was reading through it, her horror growing with each page when she heard footsteps in the hall. She moved fast, shoved the ledger inside her dressing gown, swung the portrait closed, grabbed her candle. The footsteps were getting closer. She couldn't make it back to her room without being seen. She slipped behind the heavy curtains just as the study door opened. 2 people entered. One was Wickham, his voice low and urgent. The other, "I'm telling you, she's asking too many questions," Wickham was saying, demanding reports, wanting to tour the property, insisting on meeting with Thorne. "She's going to ruin everything." Then we move up the timeline. The second voice was unfamiliar, male, cold. "Harrison wants this wrapped up before she can cause real problems. And Roderick is exactly where we want him, distracted trying to protect her. By the time he realizes what's happening, it'll be too late." Lydia's blood went cold. She pressed herself flatter against the wall, barely breathing. "The meeting tomorrow," the stranger continued. "Thorne will make his move. She'll either accept his proposal or she won't. Either way, Harrison gets what he wants. And if she refuses? If she fights? Then we make it look like an accident. Tragic, really. The new heir, so inexperienced, riding alone in dangerous territory. These things happen." They left before Lydia could hear more, their footsteps fading down the hallway. She waited long minutes after silence returned, her heart slamming against her ribs so hard it hurt. Wickham, the loyal steward, the man who'd served her grandmother for 40 years, was working for Harrison. Lydia stumbled back to her room on shaking legs, the ledger clutched against her chest. She locked the door, shoved a chair under the handle, and tried to think through the panic. The meeting tomorrow was a trap. Caleb was part of it. Wickham was compromised. And if Harrison had gotten to the steward, how many others in the house were his? She needed help, needed someone she could trust. She needed Roderick. The thought felt like defeat, like admitting weakness. But what choice did she have? She couldn't do this alone. Not anymore. Lydia grabbed the ledger and slipped back out into the hallway, praying she could make it to Roderick's room without being seen. His door was at the end of the west wing. She'd watched which room he'd been given. She was halfway there when someone grabbed her from behind, a hand clamping over her mouth to muffle her scream. "Don't scream." Roderick's voice in her ear, low and urgent. His hand stayed over her mouth until she nodded, then released her carefully. Lydia spun around, clutching the ledger to her chest, her heart trying to break through her ribs. "What the hell are you doing?" she hissed. "Saving you from walking straight into whatever stupidity you were planning." He glanced down at the ledger. "What's that?" "Proof. Evidence. Everything." The words tumbled out in a rush. "My grandmother hid it. Sarah told me where to look. And Wickham. Roderick. Wickham's working for Harrison. I heard him. There was someone else with him, planning. They're going to kill me tomorrow at the meeting with Caleb." Roderick's expression went very still, very cold. "Slow down. From the beginning. What exactly did you hear?" She told him everything. The safe, the ledger, the conversation she'd overheard. His face darkened with each detail, but he didn't interrupt. When she finished, he reached for the ledger. "May I?" Lydia hesitated, then handed it over. He flipped through pages quickly, his jaw tightening. "This is extensive. Your grandmother documented everything." He looked up. "Do you understand what this means? If this information gets out, it doesn't just destroy Harrison. It takes down half the territorial government. Judges, officials, business owners, everyone he's bought stays bought because exposing him exposes them too." "Good. Let them all burn." "It's not that simple. These people have power, resources, reasons to make problems disappear." He closed the ledger carefully. "Including you." "Then what do you suggest? I hide? Run? Pretend I don't know what I know?" "I suggest we be very careful about who we trust and how we use this." Roderick moved to the window, checked the grounds below. "If Wickham's compromised, we have to assume others are too. The question is who and how many." Lydia felt cold spread through her chest. The staff, the guards. Everyone in this house could be, not necessarily is. He turned back to her. "But we can't take chances. Pack light. We're leaving. Now." "In the middle of the night? They'll know something's wrong. They'll know we're spooked, different from knowing why." He was already moving toward the door. "Meet me at the stables in 10 minutes. Bring only what you can carry on horseback. And Lydia?" He paused. "Trust no one but me. Not the stable hands, not the maids, no one. Understood?" She nodded, and he disappeared into the hallway like a shadow. Lydia stood there for a moment, shaking, trying to process. Then training, years of her grandmother's stern voice insisting she be prepared for anything, kicked in. She changed quickly into riding clothes, grabbed a small bag, and shoved in essentials. Money. The ledger. A knife she found in her grandmother's desk. Her hands were steadier now, her mind clearing as panic gave way to focus. The hallway was dark and empty when she slipped out. She made it halfway to the stairs before she heard voices below. Wickham and someone else, discussing patrol schedules. Lydia froze, pressed herself into a doorway, waited. "Increase the watch on the eastern boundary. If she tries to run, that's where she'll go. And if Roderick goes with her? Then we have a convenient accident for both of them. Harrison's authorized whatever measures are necessary." They moved away, and Lydia used the noise of their departure to slip down the servants' stairs. The route was narrow, dark, meant for people who weren't supposed to be seen. Perfect. The stables were quiet when she arrived, just horses shifting in their stalls and the smell of hay and leather. No sign of Roderick. Lydia's nerves screamed at her to keep moving, but she forced herself to wait, counting seconds. A hand touched her shoulder, and she nearly jumped out of her skin. "Easy." Roderick leading 2 horses already saddled. "Ready? Where are we going?" "Away from here. I'll explain once we're clear." He helped her mount, then swung onto his own horse. "Stay close. Don't make noise. If I tell you to run, you run and don't look back." They walked the horses out quietly, keeping to shadows. The grounds were larger than Lydia had realized, formal gardens giving way to working areas, then fields, then forest. No one stopped them. No one even seemed to notice. Too easy, Lydia thought. This is too easy. They were almost to the tree line when someone shouted behind them. "There, the stables!" Roderick cursed and kicked his horse into a gallop. Lydia followed, branches whipping past her face as they plunged into the forest. Behind them, more shouts, the sound of horses being readied. Pursuit. "How many?" she gasped. "Too many. Ride hard. Don't stop." The forest was a nightmare at night. Invisible roots and low branches, the constant threat of the horse stumbling. Lydia clung to the saddle and tried to trust the animal knew what it was doing better than she did. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Roderick veered left suddenly, down a slope that felt nearly vertical in the darkness. Lydia followed and nearly lost her seat as her horse slid half the descent. They splashed through a creek, up the other side, into denser trees. "There's a hunting cabin," Roderick called back. 2 miles north. We can lose them in the ravines if we're fast enough." 2 miles might as well be 20. Lydia's thighs burned, her hands ached from gripping the reins. But she kept going because stopping meant capture, and capture meant whatever Harrison's people had planned for her tomorrow would happen tonight instead. The cabin appeared suddenly, barely more than a shack, really, tucked into a clearing so small they almost rode past it. Roderick pulled up hard. "Inside, quickly." They dragged the horses into a lean-to attached to the cabin, barely big enough for both animals. Roderick threw a tarp over them to hide their presence, then grabbed Lydia's arm and pulled her into the cabin proper. It was one room. Dirt floor, a crude fireplace, sleeping pallets that looked like they hadn't been used in years. But the walls were solid, and there was only one door. "Stay away from the window," Roderick ordered, moving to it himself. "And stay quiet." Lydia sank onto one of the pallets, trying to catch her breath. Her bag had made the journey, miraculously. She pulled out the ledger, ran her fingers over the worn leather cover. All this death and scheming over property and money and power. Outside, she could hear horses, voices calling to each other as they searched. They sounded close. Roderick stood absolutely still by the window, barely breathing. Minutes stretched into hours. Or maybe just felt like it. Finally, the sounds began to recede, the searchers moving away, spreading out, following wrong trails. Roderick exhaled slowly. "They'll be back. We have maybe an hour before they widen the search pattern and find this place. Then we keep moving." "Not yet. The horses need rest, and so do we. Push too hard, and we'll kill the animals or ourselves." He moved away from the window, sat on the opposite pallet. In the faint moonlight through the grimy window, his face looked carved from stone. "Tell me about Caleb Thorne." The question caught her off guard. "What?" "You said you knew him years ago. How well?" "That's none of your business." "It became my business when Harrison started using him as a weapon against you." Roderick's voice was flat, factual. "So I'll ask again. How well did you know him?" Lydia wanted to tell him to go to hell. Instead, she found herself answering. Maybe because they were hiding in a shack in the middle of nowhere with people hunting them. Maybe because exhaustion made honesty easier than lies. "We were engaged, briefly, 5 years ago. Your family didn't mention that in any of the documents I saw." "Because my family didn't know. It was unofficial, a promise between us." She stared at the dark ceiling. "I was 19, stupid. I thought love was enough to overcome practical concerns like money and status." "What happened?" "What always happens. Reality." The bitterness in her voice surprised even her. "Caleb's family lost their fortune gambling. Suddenly the romantic notion of marrying beneath my station became a lot less romantic when it meant actual poverty. My father found out, forbade it. Caleb's pride got in the way. We fought. It ended badly. And now he's allied with Harrison, apparently." Lydia pulled her knees up to her chest. I don't know what I thought, that maybe there was still some part of him that remembered what we had, that I could appeal to that. But you heard the plan tonight. The meeting's a trap. Maybe he doesn't know. Maybe Harrison's using him too." Roderick made a sound that might have been a laugh. "You're smarter than that. Men don't accidentally end up on Harrison's side. They choose it." "Like you chose to kidnap me?" "Exactly like that. We all make choices, Lydia. Some are worse than others, but we own them." He leaned forward, elbows on knees. "The question is what you choose to do now. Do you still want to meet him tomorrow?" "The meeting was supposed to be a trap. They're expecting me." "Then we don't give them what they expect. We change the terms." Something shifted in Roderick's expression. "Unless you still care about him, in which case this gets complicated." "I care about not dying. Everything else is secondary." "Good, because I have a plan, but you're not going to like it." "I haven't liked anything that's happened in the last 48 hours. Why start now?" He smiled at that, brief and sharp. "We let the meeting happen, but not the way Harrison wants. You show up early, before Caleb and whoever else Harrison has waiting. You confront Wickham publicly, expose him with the evidence from the ledger, force everyone to choose sides before Harrison can control the narrative." Lydia stared at him. "That's insane. We're outnumbered, outgunned, and you want me to walk into a trap and announce that I know it's a trap? I want you to turn the trap around. Make Harrison's people react instead of act. Seize the initiative." He was warming to the idea now. She could hear it in his voice. "Right now they think you're running scared. They think you're weak, inexperienced, easy to manipulate. Prove them wrong. Or get killed trying. Possibly. But hiding gets you killed eventually anyway. At least this way you go down fighting." The terrible part was, He was right. Running bought them hours, maybe days. But Harrison had too many resources, too many people. Eventually, they'd be found. Eventually, they'd run out of places to hide. "What about you?" she asked. "Where do you fit in this brilliant plan?" "I'll be there, in the background, with people I trust. If it goes wrong, we fight our way out." He met her eyes. "And if it goes very wrong, I get you out even if it costs me everything else. That's the deal." "Why? Why risk so much for me?" Roderick was quiet for a long moment. "Because your grandmother asked me to. Because you're the best weapon I have against Harrison. And because—" He trailed off. "Because what?" "Because you remind me that there are still people in this world worth protecting, even if they don't make it easy." The confession hung in the air between them. Lydia didn't know what to say to that, so she said nothing. Outside, the forest had gone quiet, too quiet. Lydia tensed. "Roderick, I hear it!" He was already moving, grabbing his bag. "Out, now!" They ran for the lean-to just as the cabin door exploded inward. Men poured through, 4 of them, armed with clubs and knives. Roderick shoved Lydia toward the horses. "Go!" Not without... He grabbed her and physically threw her onto her horse. "I said go!" The horse bolted before she could argue, crashing through the lean-to's back wall and into the forest beyond. Behind her she heard fighting, grunts, impacts, someone screaming. Lydia pulled the horse up hard, turning back. She couldn't just leave him. Couldn't. Roderick burst out of the cabin, blood streaming from a cut above his eye, half dragging, half carrying himself toward his horse. 3 men followed. 1 had a crossbow. The bolt took Roderick in the shoulder as he reached his mount. He made a sound, not quite a scream, more like fury given voice, and kept moving. Somehow got himself into the saddle, somehow kicked the horse into motion. They ran, crashing through underbrush, the forest a blur of shadows and danger. Behind them, more shouting, more pursuit. "How bad?" Lydia called over. "Bad enough. Keep moving." They rode until the forest started to thin, until the sounds of pursuit faded again. Dawn was breaking, pale light filtering through the trees. Roderick was swaying in his saddle, the crossbow bolt still lodged in his shoulder, blood soaking his shirt. "We need to stop," Lydia said. We need to keep moving. They're tracking us." "You're going to fall off that horse and break your neck. Then what good are you to anyone?" He started to argue, then his horse stumbled and he nearly went down with it. Lydia grabbed his reins, forced both animals to stop. "Off, now!" Getting him down was ugly. The bolt shifted and he went white, almost passed out. Lydia caught him barely and half dragged him to a fallen log. "I need to take this out," she said, looking at the bolt. "No, leave it. Pulling it will make the bleeding worse. Leaving it will kill you slower. Pick your poison." His laugh was weak. "You're enjoying this too much. Shut up and bite down on something." She found a stick, made him grip it between his teeth. Then she grabbed the bolt with both hands and pulled. It came out with a wet, horrible sound. Roderick's whole body went rigid, but he didn't scream, just breathed hard through his nose until the worst of it passed. Lydia used strips torn from her shirt to pack the wound, bind it as tight as she could. Field medicine, the kind she'd learned from necessity after too many hunting accidents with her brothers. "You've done this before," Roderick managed. "Unfortunately." She tied off the bandage. "This'll hold for a few hours, but you need a real physician. Can't risk it. Anyone Harrison hasn't bought, he's got watched." He looked up at her, his eyes clearer now despite the pain. "We stick to the plan. The meeting at the mill. Noon. Can you do it alone if I can't be there? Can you stop trying to be heroic for 5 minutes?" "That's not an answer." Lydia sat back on her heels. Could she? Walk into that meeting alone, face down Wickham and whoever else Harrison sent, expose the conspiracy and hope it worked instead of getting her killed? No. She couldn't, but she was going to anyway. "I can do it," she said. Liar, but a convincing one. Roderick smiled despite the pain. "We'll do it together. Just give me an hour. Let the bleeding stop." They didn't have an hour. Lydia knew it, and she suspected he did too. But they took the time anyway, sitting in the growing light, listening for pursuit that would inevitably come. "Tell me about her," Lydia said quietly. "Catherine, your cousin. She seemed to care what happened to you. Catherine cares about power. I'm useful to her plans, so she pretends to care about me. He shifted, winced. But there's truth in it, too. We grew up together. She's the closest thing to family I have left. And the woman you were supposed to marry before my family pulled out? There was no woman. Just the arrangement with you. He closed his eyes. I told you. It was never personal. Then why does it feel personal now? The question surprised both of them. Roderick opened his eyes, looked at her like he was really seeing her for the first time. I don't know, he said finally, but it does. They sat in silence after that, each lost in thoughts too complicated to voice. The sun climbed higher, birds started singing, oblivious to human drama. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rang the hour. 9 o'clock. 3 hours until the meeting. We should move, Roderick said, struggling to his feet. Need to get there early. Set up. You can barely stand. I've fought through worse. He made it 2 steps before his leg buckled. Lydia caught him again, felt how much he was shaking. Stop lying, to me and to yourself. Fine, I'm hurt, possibly worse than I want to admit. He met her eyes. But that doesn't change what needs to happen. You have to go to that meeting, with or without me. I vote with. Then help me onto that horse and stop arguing. Getting him mounted took everything they both had. By the time they were riding again, slow and careful, Roderick was barely conscious. Lydia led both horses, following the sun toward what she hoped was the eastern boundary of her estate. The old mill came into view just before 11. A stone building, half collapsed, sitting beside a stream that had probably powered it once. There were already horses there, at least 5. More than she'd expected. Lydia pulled up short, scanning the area. Too many places for ambush. Too many unknowns. We should leave, she whispered to Roderick. Regroup. Try a different approach. He lifted his head with visible effort. No, this is our shot. You go. I'll cover you from here. With what? You can barely hold a weapon. Then I'll improvise. He reached into his saddlebag, pulled out a pistol she hadn't known he had. Go. Cause trouble. I'll handle whatever comes after. Lydia looked at him, pale, bleeding, determined, looked at the mill where her enemies waited, looked at the ledger in her bag, the evidence that could destroy them or get her killed. If I don't come back, she started. You will. You're too stubborn to die easily. If I don't come back, take that ledger to someone who can use it. Someone outside Harrison's reach. I will. He caught her hand. And Lydia, whatever happens, you're not a pawn anymore. You proved that just by getting this far. She wanted to say something meaningful, something that matched the moment. Instead, she squeezed his hand once and let go. Then she rode toward the mill alone. The men waiting there turned as she approached. Wickham, looking uncomfortable. 2 she didn't recognize, hired muscle probably. And standing apart from them, hands in his pockets, casual as if they were meeting for tea instead of conspiracy. Caleb Thorne. He looked the same, older, harder around the edges, but the same blue eyes and easy smile that had made her 19-year-old self stupid with love. He watched her dismount, made no move to help. Lydia, he said. Just her name, no inflection. Caleb, she kept her voice level. Interesting company you're keeping these days. I could say the same about you. He glanced past her, looking for Roderick probably. Wickham said you'd come alone. Wickham says a lot of things, most of them lies. She turned to the steward. How much is Harrison paying you? Must be substantial to betray 40 years of loyalty. Wickham's face went tight. Miss Vance, I understand you're upset, but what? But I should accept that my grandmother's most trusted servant sold me out? That you helped poison her? Lydia pulled out the ledger, held it up. She documented everything, Wickham. Every bribe, every betrayal, including yours. The effect was immediate. Wickham went white. The hired muscle shifted nervously. Even Caleb's casual demeanor cracked slightly. That's not possible, Wickham said. Lady Cecilia trusted me with everything. She trusted you right up until she realized you were the one making her sick. Lydia opened the ledger to a marked page. Shall I read it? Wickham bringing my tea personally, insisting I drink it all. The shaking gets worse after. Need to test, need to know. That doesn't prove anything. No. How about the documentation of payments from Harrison's shell companies to your accounts? Or the letters arranging my grandmother's accident that never quite happened because she died first? Lydia's voice rose. You were supposed to be family. She treated you like family. And you killed her for money. I didn't. It wasn't. Wickham was stammering now, his composure cracking. She was old. She was going to die anyway. Harrison just accelerated the timeline. The admission hung in the air. One of the hired men took a step back, clearly not signed up for murder confessions. Caleb, though. Caleb just watched with those cold blue eyes, and Lydia felt something inside her die that she hadn't realized was still alive. You knew, she said quietly. That's why you're here. You knew what they did to her. I knew Harrison wanted the estate. Knew he'd do whatever it took to get it. Caleb shrugged. The old woman was in the way. Now she's not. That's business. She was my grandmother. She was a tyrant who controlled half the territory and refused to share power with anyone who might have used it better. He stepped closer. You want to know the truth, Lydia? I'm glad she's dead. She blocked progress for decades. Now maybe this territory can finally move forward. Under Harrison's control, under efficient management, which you can be part of. His voice softened, took on the tone he'd used years ago when convincing her to defy her father. Marry me. We combine the estates, create something bigger than either of us alone. You get security, I get legitimacy. Harrison gets his access. Everyone wins. Except everyone you had to kill to make it happen. Collateral damage. Your grandmother understood that concept even if she didn't practice it. He held out his hand. What do you say? One more time for old time's sake? Lydia looked at his hand, at his face, at the man she'd once loved enough to defy her entire family for. I say you can go to hell. She threw the ledger at Wickham, not to hurt him, but to force a reaction. As he flinched and caught it reflexively, she ran. Not toward her horse, but toward the mill itself, toward the collapsing structure with its dark doorways and defensive positions. Behind her, chaos erupted. Shouting, running, someone yelled for the men to catch her. Lydia made it through the mill door just as a gunshot cracked the air. The bullet hit stone somewhere to her left, spraying chips. She dove deeper into the building, into shadows and rubble and the smell of old water. Another shot. This one from a different direction. Roderick, she realized, providing cover fire from wherever he'd positioned himself. Thank heaven for that. Footsteps behind her. Heavy, confident. She scrambled over a collapsed beam, cut her hand on broken stone, kept moving. You can't run forever, Caleb's voice, closer than she expected. Lydia grabbed a piece of rubble, half a brick, and threw it at his voice. Heard a satisfying grunt of impact. Watch me! She found stairs leading down into what must have been the mill's lower level. Flooded now, ankle-deep in stagnant water, but it offered more hiding spots. She splashed through it, trying to stay quiet despite her gasping breath. A hand grabbed her from behind. She fought, elbows, nails, teeth, everything her grandmother's paranoid insistence on self-defense training had taught her. Connected with flesh. Heard cursing. But there were two of them, the hired muscle, and they were stronger. They dragged her back up the stairs, into the light, threw her down hard at Caleb's feet. He stood over her, one hand pressed to his bleeding nose where she'd hit him with the brick. That was stupid. You bring out the worst in me. He kicked her. Not hard enough to break anything, but hard enough to hurt. Lydia curled around the pain, trying to breathe. Last chance, Caleb said. Sign the estate over to Harrison. Marry me. Live. Or we do this the hard way. There's no hard way, there's just murder. Call it what it is. Fine. He pulled out a knife. Murder it is. The knife caught the sunlight streaming through the broken roof, and Lydia watched it descend with a strange clarity. She'd read somewhere that time slowed in moments like this. Turned out that was true. She also realized she wasn't ready to die. Lydia rolled hard to the left just as the blade came down, felt it slice through the fabric of her sleeve instead of her throat. She kicked out blindly and connected with Caleb's knee. He stumbled, cursed, and she scrambled backward through the water and debris. Hold her still, Caleb snapped at his men. The two hired thugs moved to grab her again, but a gunshot from outside the mill shattered what remained of a window. One of the men yelped and dove for cover. Roderick, still out there, still fighting, despite a crossbow bolt through his shoulder and blood loss that should have knocked him unconscious by now. Lydia used the distraction to grab a piece of rotted wood and swing it at the second man. It connected with his temple and he went down hard. She didn't wait to see if he'd get back up, just ran deeper into the mill's ruins, splashing through fetid water, her breath coming in ragged gasps. "Enough!" Caleb's roar echoed off stone walls. "Wickham, get out there and deal with Hale. You too!" He gestured at his remaining conscious thug and the one who'd taken cover. "Find her. I don't care if you have to tear this building apart brick by brick." Lydia pressed herself into a gap between two collapsed walls, trying to control her breathing. Her hand throbbed where she'd cut it earlier, and her ribs ached from Caleb's kick, but she was alive. Still thinking, still dangerous. The ledger. Where was the ledger? She'd thrown it at Wickham, which meant either he still had it or it was somewhere in the chaos outside. Either way, the evidence was no longer in her possession. Brilliant strategy, Lydia. Footsteps approached her hiding spot. Heavy boots splashing through water. She tensed, looked around for anything she could use as a weapon. Found a rusted piece of metal that might have once been part of the mill's machinery. The footsteps passed. Moved toward the far end of the building. Lydia let out a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. Outside, she heard more gunshots, shouting. Wickham's voice raised in anger. Then silence. The kind of silence that meant someone had either won or died. Lydia couldn't stay hidden, couldn't wait to find out which. She had to move, had to act, had to do something other than cower in the dark, waiting for Caleb to find her. She crept toward a different entrance, a gap where the mill's wall had collapsed outward, creating a makeshift exit. If she could get outside, get to the horses, maybe she could... A hand clamped over her mouth from behind. Again. She was getting really tired of that particular tactic, but this time the voice in her ear was different. "Don't scream, it's me." Sarah, the maid from the estate, the one who'd told her about the hidden safe. Lydia went still and Sarah released her cautiously. The girl looked terrified, her clothes soaked and muddy, her eyes too wide. "What are you doing here?" Lydia whispered. "Following you. Miss Vance, I'm so sorry. I didn't know Wickham was... I thought I was helping, but I led you right into... Later. Right now, I need you to tell me if there's another way out of here." Sarah nodded quickly. "The sluice gate, on the north side. It's partially collapsed, but there's room to squeeze through if you're careful." "Show me." The girl led her through the ruins, moving with the confidence of someone who'd clearly explored this place before. They passed within feet of one of Caleb's men, and Lydia held her breath, but he was facing the wrong direction. The sluice gate was exactly as advertised, a narrow opening where water had once flowed to power the mill. Now it was just a gap in the stone, partially blocked with debris but navigable. "You first," Lydia said, "but if something goes wrong, I need you to run to Roderick's estate. Tell Catherine what happened. She'll know what to do." Sarah hesitated, then nodded and squeezed through the opening. Lydia started to follow, then heard voices close behind her. "Check every corner. She's got to be here somewhere." Too late to run. Lydia pressed herself flat against the wall beside the sluice gate and prayed the shadows were deep enough to hide her. Two men passed within arm's reach. She could smell tobacco on one of them, hear his heavy breathing. They moved toward the far end of the mill, arguing about where to search next. Lydia started to slip through the sluice gate after Sarah. "Found something!" The shout came from outside. Lydia froze halfway through the opening, wedged between stone and rusted metal. "What is it?" Caleb's voice, sharp with interest. "The ledger, sir. There's blood on it." No. Lydia forced herself the rest of the way through the sluice gate, scraping her shoulders raw in the process. Sarah was waiting on the other side, white-faced. "Run," Lydia gasped. "Now!" They ran. The forest on this side of the mill was thicker, older growth that hadn't been cleared for the approach road. Lydia and Sarah crashed through it without any attempt at stealth, just pure desperate speed. Behind them, more shouting. Discovery. Pursuit. Sarah stumbled and went down hard. Lydia grabbed her, hauled her up. The girl's ankle was twisted, maybe broken. She couldn't run anymore. "Leave me," Sarah gasped. "You have to..." "Shut up!" Lydia got under her shoulder, took her weight. "We're not leaving anyone behind." They made it maybe another 100 yards before the voices got too close. Lydia pulled Sarah behind a massive fallen tree, pressed them both flat against the moss-covered bark. Footsteps crashed past. Caleb's men, spreading out to search. One passed close enough that Lydia could see the mud on his boots. Then, from somewhere to their left, a horse whinnied. Lydia's heart leaped. The horses. If they could reach them. She helped Sarah up again, and they moved toward the sound as quietly as they could manage. The girl was trying not to cry out every time she put weight on her injured ankle, but small sounds of pain kept escaping. The horses were in a small clearing, still tied where Lydia had left them, including, miraculously, Roderick's mount, which meant he wasn't on it, which meant he was either still fighting or... Don't think about that. Focus on what you can control. Lydia got Sarah onto the most docile of the horses, then started to mount her own. A twig snapped behind her. She turned to find Caleb standing at the edge of the clearing, the ledger in one hand and his knife in the other. Blood stained his shirt. Not his own, she realized with cold horror. Roderick's blood, probably. Or Wickham's. Persistent, Caleb said almost admirably. I'll give you that. You always were stubborn. And you were always a bastard. I was just too young to see it. I was honest. Still am. This territory needs strong leadership. Harrison can provide that. You can't. He advanced slowly, deliberately. Last chance, Lydia, for old time's sake. Come with me willingly. We can still make this work. By work, you mean let you control everything while I smile and look pretty? I mean build something together. Isn't that what you wanted 5 years ago? Partnership? 5 years ago I wanted love. Now I know better. Lydia's hand found her belt, where she'd shoved the knife she'd taken from her grandmother's desk. Now I know partnership requires trust, and I wouldn't trust you to water a plant. Caleb's expression hardened. Then you're a fool. He lunged. Lydia pulled the knife and slashed wildly. More luck than skill, but it connected. A line of red opening across Caleb's forearm. He hissed and fell back. You're going to regret that, he snarled. Add it to the list. She vaulted onto her horse and kicked it hard. The animal bolted, Sarah's mount following instinctively. Behind them, Caleb's curses faded into the sound of hoofbeats and branches whipping past. They rode hard until the horses were lathered and shaking. Finally, when Lydia was sure no one was following, she pulled up in a small clearing beside a stream. We need to keep moving, Sarah said weakly. They'll track us. Not if we're smart about it. Lydia dismounted and led both horses into the stream. We go upstream. Water hides the trail. They traveled that way for maybe a mile, the horses picking their way carefully over slippery stones. When they finally emerged, Lydia took them in a direction that would seem random unless you knew the territory. But she was starting to know it. The maps Roderick had shown her, the documents her grandmother had left, the landscape she'd ridden through the night before. It was all coming together in her head like a puzzle, finally making sense. Her estate wasn't just valuable because of what was on it. It was valuable because of where it sat, the nexus point of trade routes, water access, and territorial boundaries. Control this land and you controlled everything around it. Her grandmother had understood that, had spent 40 years protecting it. Now it was Lydia's turn. They reached a small settlement just before dark, barely more than a trading post and a few houses, but it had people who weren't on Harrison's payroll. Lydia knew this because her grandmother's notes had mentioned it specifically. Independent folk, stubborn, useful. The trading post owner, a weathered woman named Margaret, who looked like she could wrestle bears for fun, took one look at Lydia and Sarah's condition and started barking orders at her sons. Get the horses settled. You, she pointed at Lydia, inside. You look like death warmed over. I need to get a message to Roderick Hale's estate, Lydia said. It's urgent. His Grace is already here. Lydia's head snapped up. What? Margaret jerked her thumb toward the back room. Showed up an hour ago, bleeding all over my clean floor. Kept saying someone named Lydia was coming and I should watch for her. You her? Yes. Is he alive? Barely. That bolt wound's infected. He needs a real doctor, not my field medicine. Margaret's expression softened slightly. But he's tough and stubborn, like someone else I'm looking at. Lydia found him in the back room, pale and feverish on a cot that looked too small for his frame. Someone, Margaret probably, had cleaned and rebandaged the wound, but even Lydia could see the angry red spreading from the edges. His eyes opened when she entered. You're alive. You sound surprised. Terrified, actually. He tried to sit up, failed. The ledger? Caleb has it. I'm sorry. I threw it and then everything went to hell. Did you see what was in it before he took it? Enough. Names, dates, payments, everything we'd need to destroy Harrison if we could get it back. We will. Roderick's voice was rough with fever. But first we need to stay alive long enough to use it. Lydia pulled up a stool beside the cot. What happened after I went into the mill? Wickham tried to shoot me. Missed. I didn't. He closed his eyes. He's dead, Lydia. I killed him. She should have felt something at that. Shock, horror, grief. Instead, she just felt tired. Good. You mean that? He murdered my grandmother, tried to kill me. Yes, I mean it. She touched his forehead, burning hot. You need a doctor. Can't risk it. Harrison will have people watching every physician within 50 miles. His hand found hers, gripped weakly. You need to go back to the city, to the authorities, show them what you know. Without the ledger as proof, your testimony, Sarah's, mine, if I live long enough to give it. He was fading. She could see it, the fever pulling him under. Promise me. Don't let Harrison win. I promise. Now stop talking like you're dying and rest. Lydia, rest. That's an order. His mouth quirked slightly. Yes, ma'am. She sat with him until his breathing evened out into sleep, then went to find Margaret. The older woman was in the main room, cleaning a rifle with the kind of casual competence that suggested she'd used it recently. How bad is he really? Lydia asked. Bad. That infection's spreading fast. He's got maybe 2 days before it kills him if we don't get the fever down. Margaret set down the rifle. There's a doctor in Millbrook. 3 hours ride. He's good and he's discreet. But it'll cost. I'll pay whatever it takes. It's not about money, girl. It's about risk. If Harrison's men are watching doctors like your Duke says, sending for one could bring them down on all of us. Lydia thought about it, weighed the options, came to a decision that probably would have horrified her a week ago. Then we don't send for him. We go to him, tonight, and we make sure no one follows. Margaret's eyebrows rose. You got a plan? The beginning of one. I need your help, and your son's, and anyone else in this settlement who's willing to stand up to Harrison. That's a tall order. Harrison's got long reach and a longer memory. He also murdered Lady Cecilia and tried to steal her estate through fraud and force. Lydia met the woman's eyes. I'm her granddaughter. I'm claiming what's mine. Anyone who helps me, I'll remember. Anyone who stands aside, I'll remember that too. Margaret studied her for a long moment. Then she smiled, sharp and dangerous. Your grandmother said you had steel in you. Guess she wasn't wrong. She stood. Give me an hour. I'll round up everyone who's got a grievance with Harrison. Around here, that's most of the settlement. True to her word, Margaret assembled a group of 15 people within the hour. Farmers, traders, a blacksmith, a former soldier who'd lost his commission over some dispute with Harrison's allies. All of them angry, all of them ready. Here's the situation, Lydia told them, her voice steady despite her racing heart. Harrison Vance is trying to steal my inheritance through corruption and murder. He's got the local authorities in his pocket and enough hired thugs to make a frontal assault suicide. But he doesn't have you. He doesn't have people who know this territory better than his fancy city soldiers. What are you proposing? The former soldier asked. His name was Thomas, and he had scars that suggested he'd seen real combat. A distraction. We make Harrison think I'm heading north toward the mountains. Easy enough to fake a trail. Meanwhile, a smaller group takes Roderick south to Millbrook for medical help. By the time Harrison realizes we've split up, we're scattered enough that he can't catch everyone. And what happens when he does catch you? Margaret asked. Because he will eventually. Then I make sure I'm somewhere public when it happens. Somewhere he can't just make me disappear. Lydia had been thinking about this during the ride. The territorial council meeting, it's in 4 days. Every major landowner, every official. If I show up there with evidence and witnesses, Harrison can't silence me without exposing himself. He'll kill you before you get there. Maybe. But I'm betting he won't risk it if he thinks there's a chance I've already spread the information around. That's where you all come in. You start talking, rumors, whispers, nothing specific enough to be called slander, but enough to make people nervous. Make Harrison wonder what I know and who I've told. Thomas nodded slowly. Information warfare. Undermine his position before the real fight starts. Exactly. They spent the next hour planning specifics. Who would lay the false trail north? Who would escort Roderick south? How to spread the rumors without making them traceable? It wasn't elegant. It wasn't guaranteed to work. But it was something, which was better than nothing. As the group dispersed to their assignments, Sarah approached hesitantly. "Miss Vance, I want to help, whatever you need." Lydia looked at the girl, injured, frightened, but determined, reminded her of herself a week ago. "You've already helped more than you know, but yes, there is something." She pulled Sarah aside. "I need you to go to Roderick's estate. Find Catherine, his cousin. Tell her everything that happened. She needs to know Roderick's injured and Harrison has the ledger." "You trust her?" "I don't trust anyone completely, but she's invested in Roderick's survival, which means she's invested in stopping Harrison. That's close enough to an ally for now." Sarah nodded and limped off to find a horse. Lydia watched her go, then turned to find Margaret watching her with an appraising expression. "You're not what I expected," the older woman said. "What did you expect? Some soft city girl who'd fall apart under pressure. Instead, you're organizing resistance like you were born to it." Margaret tilted her head. "Your grandmother would be proud, and possibly horrified. It's a good combination." "I'm terrified," Lydia admitted quietly. "Every minute of this. I have no idea if any of it will work." "That's what makes it brave. Brave isn't not being scared, it's being scared and doing it anyway." Margaret handed her a rifle. "You know how to use this?" "My brothers taught me. I'm not great, but I can hit what I aim at if it's close enough." "Close enough is all we need most of the time." Margaret paused. "You should know, word's already spreading about the fight at the mill, about Harrison's man dying. People are talking." "What are they saying?" "That Lady Cecilia's granddaughter is just as tough and twice as mean as the old woman ever was." Margaret's smile was fierce. "Some are scared, but others are starting to hope." Hope. Lydia let the word settle. When was the last time she'd felt that? Before her grandmother died? Before she'd realized how deep the corruption went? Maybe it didn't matter. Maybe hope was something you created rather than something you found. "We leave in an hour," she told Margaret. "Make sure your people are ready." The hour passed too quickly. Roderick was awake again when they moved him, lucid enough to argue about being transported, but too weak to actually resist. They got him onto a wagon fitted with padding and blankets, made him as comfortable as possible. "This is stupid," he muttered as Lydia checked his bandages one last time. "You should stay with the group. Let someone else play messenger." "Someone else didn't inherit this mess, I did." She tucked another blanket around him. "Besides, you said you wanted willing allies. Well, I'm a line. Don't make me regret it by dying on me." "Wouldn't dream of it." His hand caught hers. "Lydia, if this doesn't work, it will." "But if it doesn't, the documents I showed you about the alliance, there's a codicil. If anything happens to me, my estates revert to you. Everything. It makes you powerful enough to stand against Harrison even without your grandmother's property." She stared at him. "Why would you do that?" "Because someone has to stop him. And you're the only person I've met who's stubborn enough to try." He smiled faintly. "Also because your grandmother asked me to protect you. This is the best protection I can offer. I don't want your estates. I want you alive to manage them yourself." "Then I guess we both better survive this." Thomas called out that they were ready to move. Lydia squeezed Roderick's hand once more, then stepped back. She watched the wagon roll south, escorted by Thomas and 3 others she'd come to trust over the past few hours. Watched until it disappeared into the darkness. Then she turned to the group staying with her, 6 people, including Margaret, 6 against however many Harrison would send. "Ready?" Margaret asked. "No, but let's go anyway." They rode north, making no attempt to hide their trail. Left obvious signs, broken branches, campfire sites, discarded equipment. Anything to make it look like Lydia was running scared toward the mountains. Around midnight, they stopped at a crossroads. This was where they'd split up, some continuing north to maintain the deception, others doubling back with Lydia toward the territorial capital. "You sure about this?" Margaret asked. "Once you're in the city, you're committed. No running, no hiding." "I'm sure. Harrison wants a fight? I'll give him one, but on my terms, in front of witnesses." Margaret handed her a package wrapped in oilcloth. "From your grandmother's estate. Thomas found it hidden in her rooms. Thought you might want it." Lydia unwrapped it carefully. Inside was a letter in her grandmother's handwriting sealed with wax. and beneath it, a ring, heavy gold set with a dark stone, the Vance family seal. She broke the seal on the letter with shaking hands. Lydia, if you're reading this, I'm dead and you're in danger. Good. Danger means you're fighting instead of surrendering. The ring is yours by right of inheritance. More importantly, it's yours by right of survival. Wear it. Let them see it. Let them know you're not just my granddaughter, you're my successor. You'll make mistakes, you'll trust the wrong people and doubt the right ones, you'll be terrified and exhausted and you'll want to quit. Don't. The moment you stop fighting is the moment they win. I chose you because you're smart enough to learn and stubborn enough to endure. That's all leadership is, really. Learning and enduring until you're strong enough to change things. Don't let Harrison take what we built. Don't let fear make you small. And for heaven's sake, don't marry anyone just because they ask nicely. Make them earn you. You're stronger than you know. Prove me right. Cecilia. Lydia read it twice, then slipped the ring onto her finger. It was too large, meant for hands that had wielded power for decades. But she'd grow into it. She had to. What did it say? Margaret asked gently. That I'm stuck with this whether I want it or not. Lydia tucked the letter carefully into her jacket. And that I need to stop being afraid of people who should be afraid of me. Good advice. They rode through the night, avoiding main roads, sticking to paths that only locals knew. By dawn, they were 20 miles from the territorial capital, and Lydia was so exhausted she could barely stay upright in the saddle. They stopped at a farmhouse owned by one of Margaret's cousins, a sprawling family operation where extra people blended in easily. Lydia was given a room, a basin of water to wash in, and strict orders to rest. She managed maybe 3 hours of fitful sleep before raised voices woke her. Margaret was arguing with someone in the main room. Lydia grabbed her knife. Sleeping with weapons was her new normal, apparently, and crept to the door. Telling you it's too dangerous. Harrison's men are everywhere. The moment she shows her face, then she better make it count. Margaret's voice, sharp and final. She's not running anymore. None of us are. Lydia opened the door. The room fell silent as everyone turned to look at her. Standing beside Margaret was a man Lydia recognized from her grandmother's documents. Edmund Price, one of the few territorial council members who'd consistently voted against Harrison's interests. Old money, old principles, and old enough to remember when corruption wasn't the standard operating procedure. Mr. Price, Lydia said, trying to sound more confident than she felt. I wasn't expecting you, Miss Vance. He bowed slightly, formal and careful. I came as soon as I heard you were alive. There are rumors about your grandmother's death, about attempts on your life. I wanted to hear the truth directly. This was it. The moment when she either gained an ally or made an enemy. Lydia took a breath and made her choice. She told him everything. The poison, Wickham's betrayal, the ledger and the evidence it contained, Harrison's network of corruption, the ambush at the mill. All of it, laid out with as much detail as she could remember. Price listened without interrupting. His expression remained carefully neutral, giving nothing away. When she finished, the silence stretched for what felt like hours. Can you prove any of this? He asked finally. The ledger's gone. Caleb Thorne has it, but I have witnesses, people who saw what happened, and I have my grandmother's letter warning about the poison before she died. Hearsay and circumstantial evidence, not enough to bring charges against someone as powerful as Harrison Vance. Lydia's heart sank. Then you don't believe me. I didn't say that. Price moved to the window, looked out at the farmyard where people were going about their morning routines. I've suspected Harrison of corruption for years. Had no proof, no witnesses willing to testify, everyone too afraid of repercussions. He turned back to her. You're not afraid. I'm terrified, but I'm angrier than I am scared. Good. Anger's useful. It makes you sharp. He pulled out a pocket watch, checked it. The Territorial Council meets tomorrow evening. I can get you on the agenda. A petition regarding your inheritance. Public forum. Official record. Harrison can't silence you there without revealing himself. He'll try to stop me before I get there. Probably. Which is why you're not going to hide. Price's smile was thin and calculating. You're going to parade through the city. Make a spectacle. Let everyone see Lady Cecilia's granddaughter claiming her birthright. Margaret snorted. That's either brilliant or suicidal. Both, Price agreed. But it's also the only play we have. Harrison's power comes from operating in shadows. We drag him into the light. Lydia thought about walking openly through streets where Harrison had eyes everywhere, about trusting that public exposure would protect her better than secrecy. It was insane. It was also exactly the kind of thing her grandmother would have done. I'll need clothes, she said, something that makes a statement, and I'll need people with me, enough to make it clear I'm not alone in this. I can provide both, Price said, and I can ensure the council chamber is packed with observers, journalists, minor nobility, anyone with a vested interest in seeing Harrison's power checked. He paused. But Miss Vance, once you do this, there's no going back. You'll be openly declaring war on one of the most powerful men in 3 territories. Are you prepared for that? Was she? Lydia looked down at the ring on her finger, too large, too heavy, representing responsibilities she'd never asked for. Then she thought about her grandmother dying slowly from poison, about Wickham's betrayal, about Caleb's cold calculation and Roderick's fever-bright eyes telling her not to let Harrison win, about all the people who'd helped her, risked themselves, because they were tired of being afraid. Yes, she said. I'm ready. Price nodded sharply. Then let's make some noise. The dress Price provided was black. Mourning clothes, technically, but cut in a way that suggested power rather than grief. Lydia stood in front of the mirror in the farmhouse's spare room and barely recognized herself. The woman staring back looked older, harder, like someone who'd learned to carry weight she hadn't asked for. The ring gleamed on her finger, still too large, still heavy, but hers. You look like her, Margaret said from the doorway. Your grandmother. That same expression, like you're deciding who to destroy first. Is that supposed to be a compliment? With Lady Cecilia, always. Margaret handed her a small pistol. For your pocket, just in case public exposure isn't as protective as we're hoping. Lydia took it, checked that it was loaded. 3 weeks ago, she would have been horrified at the thought of carrying a weapon. Now it just felt practical. Any word from Thomas? She asked. About Roderick? Got a message this morning. They made it to Millbrook. Doctors treating the infection. Says it'll be touch and go for a few days, but there's a chance. Margaret's expression softened slightly. He's a fighter, that one, like you. I'm not a fighter. I'm just someone who's too stubborn to die quietly. Same thing, really. They left the farmhouse in a small caravan, 2 carriages, several riders, enough of a procession to attract attention without looking like a military operation. Price had arranged everything with the kind of precision that suggested he'd been planning resistance against Harrison for longer than he'd admitted. The city came into view around midday. Lydia had been here before, of course. Social visits, shopping trips, the kind of meaningless excursions that filled a young woman's calendar. But she'd never really seen it. Not like this, with fresh eyes that noticed how many buildings bore Harrison's family crest, how many businesses operated under his shadow. He didn't just have influence here, he owned it. Second thoughts? Price asked, riding beside her carriage. Hundreds. But I'm doing it anyway. They entered through the main gate, and Lydia stepped out of the carriage exactly as Price had instructed, head high, visible to anyone watching. The Vance ring caught sunlight and threw it back like a challenge. People stopped, stared, whispered. She heard her name ripple through the crowd. That's her, Lady Cecilia's granddaughter. I heard she was dead. I heard she ran away. I heard... Lydia walked through the market square like she owned it, which technically she did. Her grandmother's holdings included property throughout the city. Margaret walked on one side, Price on the other, both radiating protective menace. They made it 3 blocks before Harrison's people appeared. 6 men, well-dressed and carefully positioned to block the street without making it obvious. The leader stepped forward, older, expensive clothes, the kind of confidence that came from decades of never being told no. Miss Vance, how unexpected. Your uncle has been terribly worried about you. I'm sure he has, Lydia said coolly. Worried I'd come back before he could steal everything that's mine. The man's smile didn't reach his eyes. Perhaps we should discuss this somewhere more private. Mr. Vance is most eager to clear up these unfortunate misunderstandings. I'll bet he is. Tell my uncle if he wants to talk, he can do it tomorrow at the Territorial Council meeting, in public, in front of witnesses. Miss Vance, I really must insist, and I really must decline. Lydia stepped closer, dropped her voice so only he could hear. You work for Harrison. That means you know what he's capable of, which means you know what I'm capable of if I'm desperate enough. So here's your choice. Get out of my way or find out exactly how desperate I am. The man held her gaze for a long moment. She could see the calculation happening. Was she bluffing? How much did she know? What would Harrison do to him if he let her pass versus what might happen if he tried to stop her here, in public, with witnesses? He stepped aside. Lydia walked past without another word, her heart slamming so hard she thought everyone must be able to hear it. But her hand stayed steady, her face stayed calm. She'd learned that much at least. How to lie with your body when your mind was screaming. They reached the boarding house Price had arranged. Respectable, centrally located, owned by someone who owed his business success to Lydia's grandmother and remembered the debt. The owner, a nervous man named Simmons, showed them to rooms on the top floor. You'll be safe here, Miss Vance. I've posted guards at all the entrances. No one gets in without my say-so. Harrison has long reach, Lydia warned. If he pressures you, he can pressure all he wants. Lady Cecilia saved my family from ruin 20 years ago. I pay my debts. Simmons nodded firmly. Besides, half this city is tired of Harrison's games. They're just too scared to say it out loud. Maybe you being here will change that. After he left, Lydia collapsed into a chair and let herself shake for a few minutes. Margaret poured her whiskey from a flask. Drink. You've earned it. Lydia drank. It burned going down, but the warmth helped settle her nerves. Do you think Harrison knows I'm here? Absolutely. Question is what he'll do about it. Margaret moved to the window, checked the street below. My guess? Nothing tonight. Too risky. But tomorrow, at the council meeting, that's when things get interesting. Interesting. That was one word for it. Lydia spent the rest of the evening preparing, going over her testimony, reviewing the documents she did have, planning for every possible angle Harrison might use to discredit her. Price came by after dark with news. The council chamber is booked solid, standing room only. Every journalist in 3 territories will be there. He looked pleased and worried at the same time. You'll have your audience. Whether that's good or bad remains to be seen. Any word from Harrison? Nothing direct. But his lawyers have been filing motions all day, claims that you're mentally unstable, that you're under undue influence from Roderick Hale, that your inheritance should be held in trust until your competency can be established. Price's mouth twisted. Standard tactics. Won't hold up legally, but they muddy the waters. Let him muddy. I'll make it clear enough. There's something else. Price hesitated. Caleb Thorne is in the city, staying at Harrison's estate. They're calling him a witness to your erratic behavior. The news shouldn't have stung. Lydia had known Caleb was fully bought, but hearing it confirmed still felt like swallowing glass. Then I'll need a witness of my own, she said. Someone who can testify about what really happened. Sarah, the maid from my grandmother's estate. Where is she? On her way. Should arrive by morning. Price studied her carefully. Are you ready for this? Once you stand up in that chamber tomorrow, you can't take it back. Every word will be recorded, published, used against you. Good. Let it be used. Let everyone see what Harrison really is. She said it with more confidence than she felt, but Price seemed satisfied. He left with final instructions about timing and procedure, leaving Lydia alone with her thoughts and too much whiskey. She didn't sleep well. Every sound in the boarding house seemed threatening. Footsteps in the hall, voices from other rooms, the wind rattling windows. She kept the pistol Margaret had given her under her pillow and one hand on the knife from her grandmother's desk. Around 3 a.m, someone knocked softly at her door. Lydia grabbed the pistol, approached carefully. Who is it? Catherine Hale, Roderick's cousin. We need to talk. Lydia opened the door cautiously. Catherine stood in the hallway, looking travel-worn and irritated. Same woman from the garden conversation Lydia had overheard. Beautiful and dangerous and currently very annoyed. How did you get past the guards? I'm good at getting past guards. Can I come in or are we having this conversation in the hallway? Lydia stepped aside. Catherine swept into the room, took in the sparse furnishings and defensive positioning with one sharp glance. So this is where you've been hiding. Roderick's been driving the doctor mad asking about you. He's awake? Unfortunately. Fever broke yesterday. Now he's conscious and cranky and demanding updates. Catherine turned to face her. He sent me with a message. Several messages, actually. Most of them variations on don't do anything stupid. But the important one is this. He has the ledger. Lydia's breath caught. What? One of his people intercepted Caleb before he could deliver it to Harrison. Cost us 3 men, and Caleb's now in the wind, but we have the evidence. Catherine pulled a familiar leather-bound book from her bag. All of it. Every name, every bribe, every dirty deal. Lydia took the ledger with shaking hands. Harrison doesn't know you have this? Not yet. But he'll figure it out soon enough, which is why you need to use it tomorrow before he has time to prepare a defense. Catherine's expression was hard. I won't lie to you. This makes you an even bigger target. The people named in this book? They'll want you dead. But it's also the only weapon strong enough to bring Harrison down. Your cousin almost died getting this to me. My cousin's a romantic idiot who thinks honor matters more than survival. Lucky for him, I'm practical enough to compensate. Catherine moved to the door. Use it well, Miss Vance, and try not to get yourself killed. Roderick would be insufferable if I let that happen. She left before Lydia could respond, disappearing into the dark hallway like she'd never been there. Lydia sat on the bed and opened the ledger, read through page after page of her grandmother's careful documentation. Names she recognized, council members, judges, business owners. Names she didn't recognize but would soon learn to fear, amounts of money, dates of transactions, a paper trail of corruption so extensive it was almost beautiful in its completeness. This was power, real power, the kind that could destroy lives and reshape territories. The question was whether she was ruthless enough to use it. Morning came too fast. Lydia, dressed in the black gown again, pinned her hair severely, added the ring and a necklace that had been her grandmother's. Armor, essentially, expensive fabric and jewelry to remind everyone exactly who she was and what she represented. Sarah arrived as promised, pale and nervous but determined. Miss Vance, Mr. Price said you needed me to testify. Only if you're willing. I won't force you. Lydia studied the girl. But yes, I need someone who was there, who heard what I heard, who can confirm I'm not inventing conspiracies. I'll do it, whatever you need. Sarah's jaw set stubbornly. Lady Cecilia was kind to me. She deserved better than what they did to her. The council chamber was exactly as intimidating as Lydia had imagined. High ceilings, portraits of important dead men, rows of seats filled with even more important living ones. Every face turned when she entered, and the whispers started immediately. There, Harrison, seated with his lawyers, looking calm and confident. And beside him, nauseatingly, Caleb, looking smug and untouched despite everything. Lydia took her seat in the petitioners section and forced herself to breathe normally. Price sat on her right, Margaret on her left. Sarah behind her, ready to be called. The council chairman, a pompous man named Blackwell, who Lydia knew was firmly in Harrison's pocket, called the meeting to order. We have several matters on today's agenda, but first, a petition from Miss Lydia Vance regarding her inheritance from the late Lady Cecilia Vance. Miss Vance, you may speak. This was it. Lydia stood, and the room went silent. Members of the council, thank you for hearing me. Her voice carried, stronger than she'd expected. I'm here because my grandmother was murdered, and the man responsible is sitting in this chamber. The explosion of noise was immediate. Blackwell banged his gavel, shouting for order. Harrison's lawyers were on their feet. Journalists scrambled to take notes. Through it all, Harrison himself just smiled. Order! Order! Blackwell's face was red. Miss Vance, that is a serious accusation. Do you have proof? I do. Lydia held up the ledger. This book contains evidence of a conspiracy to poison Lady Cecilia and steal her estate through fraud and corruption. It documents bribes paid to officials, threats made against witnesses, and the systematic dismantling of legal oversight to benefit one man, Harrison Vance. She opened to a marked page, began reading. Names, dates, amounts. The room got quieter with each word, the kind of silence that felt like people collectively holding their breath. That's preposterous, Harrison said calmly when she paused. My niece has been under tremendous strain since my sister-in-law's death. This fantasy of conspiracy is clearly the result of grief and manipulation by those who wish to use her for their own ends. Manipulation? Lydia turned to face him directly. Like the manipulation that put poison in my grandmother's tea? The manipulation that sent armed men to kill me at my own estate? The manipulation that tried to force me into marriage to access my inheritance? You have no proof of any of that. I have the testimony of your own steward. Wickham confessed everything before he died. Wickham died in a tragic accident during a property dispute. Hardly a reliable witness. Harrison's voice was smooth, reasonable. And even if he had said such things, he's not here to confirm it. You're asking this council to take the word of a young woman who's been hiding with known criminals against the testimony of established citizens. Then let's hear from those established citizens. Lydia nodded to Price, who stood and began distributing copies of the ledger pages. I've marked the entries that pertain to members of this council. Perhaps they'd like to explain why they've been receiving monthly payments from Harrison's accounts. The chaos that followed was spectacular. Council members shouting denials, lawyers threatening lawsuits, journalists practically trampling each other to get better views. Blackwell had given up on his gavel and was just letting it happen. Harrison remained seated, still smiling, but Lydia could see the calculation behind his eyes. He was cornered, and he knew it. "May I speak?" His voice cut through the noise. Everyone quieted immediately. Old habit, old power. "I'd like to call a witness of my own. Mr. Caleb Thorne, if you would." Caleb stood, and Lydia's stomach sank. She'd expected this, but seeing him move to the witness chair still felt like betrayal happening in slow motion. "Mr. Thorne," Harrison said pleasantly, "you've known Miss Vance for several years, haven't you?" 5 years. We were engaged, briefly, before her family ended it. And have you observed any concerning behavior from her recently? I have. Caleb's voice was steady, convincing. She approached me several weeks ago with wild accusations against her family, claimed they were plotting against her, that everyone was trying to steal her inheritance. I tried to reason with her, but she became increasingly erratic. Liar, Lydia said flatly. Miss Vance, you'll have your turn, Blackwell warned. He's lying. I didn't approach him. He was part of the plot. He was there at the mill when they tried to kill me. She attacked me, Caleb said, gesturing to a fading bruise on his face. Completely unprovoked. I was trying to help, to offer partnership, and she became violent. I believe she's genuinely unwell. Lydia felt rage building, the kind that made her hands shake and her vision narrow. But underneath it was something colder, recognition. Caleb was good at this, had always been good at manipulating perception, at making himself the victim. She'd fallen for it once. She wouldn't again. Mr. Thorne, she said, her voice cutting across his testimony, do you deny that you offered to marry me in exchange for access to my estate? I offered partnership, yes, as a way to help you, and when I refused, you tried to kill me. That's absurd. I was trying to protect you from yourself. Then explain this. Lydia pulled out her grandmother's letter, the one warning about betrayal, about not trusting family. My grandmother specifically warned me about you, about Harrison, about all of this before she died. She was elderly, confused, paranoid in her final days. Caleb's voice took on a pitying tone. Surely you can see that you're repeating her delusions. What about the poison? Sarah's voice, clear and strong from behind Lydia. I was there. I saw Wickham bringing her tea. Saw how sick she got after. Miss Vance isn't delusional. She's telling the truth. Blackwell looked annoyed. Young woman, you're not recognized. Let her speak, Price interrupted. Or are we only allowing witnesses who support Harrison's version of events? The murmur of agreement from the gallery was growing. People were starting to shift, starting to question. Lydia could feel the momentum turning. Very well, Blackwell said reluctantly. State your name and testimony. Sarah stood, and despite her nervousness, her voice carried. She told them everything. About finding Lydia being forced into a meeting, about Wickham's late-night conversations, about the confession she'd overheard planning Lydia's murder. When she finished, the silence was different, heavier, like people were starting to believe. This is all very dramatic, Harrison said, standing now. But it's also meaningless. Accusations without proof, testimony from servants and spurned lovers, nothing that would hold up in any legitimate legal proceeding. What about this? A new voice from the back of the chamber. Everyone turned. Roderick stood in the doorway, supported by Thomas on one side and the doctor from Millbrook on the other. He looked like death, pale, shaking, barely able to stand, but his eyes were clear and his voice was strong. Your Grace, Blackwell said, surprised. We heard you were gravely ill. I was. Harrison's men shot me with a crossbow while I was defending Miss Vance from an ambush. Roderick made his way slowly down the aisle, every eye following him. I have sworn testimony from the men who attacked us. 3 are dead, 2 survived, and have decided cooperation is preferable to hanging. He reached the front, pulled papers from inside his jacket with visible effort. Their statements, signed, witnessed, and notarized, all of them naming Harrison Vance as the man who hired them to kill Lady Cecilia's heir. Harrison's composure finally cracked. Those men are criminals. Hired thugs. They'll say whatever. They have details, Roderick interrupted, his voice like iron despite his condition. Dates of meetings with you. Descriptions of your estate's private study. Knowledge of your plans that only someone in your direct employ would have. Would you like me to read it aloud? This council doesn't recognize coerced testimony. It wasn't coerced. It was offered in exchange for leniency, standard legal procedure. Roderick locked eyes with Harrison. Unless you'd like to argue that this council opposes standard legal procedure, that might raise questions about all those other procedures you've been manipulating for years. The trap closed. Lydia could see Harrison realize it. There was no good move here. Admit to corruption or deny the testimony and open himself to deeper investigation. Either way, he lost. I propose, Price said into the silence, that this matter be turned over to the territorial prosecutor for criminal investigation. All evidence to be reviewed by independent authorities outside Harrison Vance's sphere of influence. Seconded, another council member said, one whose name wasn't in the ledger, Lydia noted. The vote happened quickly. 13 in favor, 4 against, 3 abstaining. Harrison's empire, built over decades, cracked open in minutes. He stood slowly, looked at Lydia with something that might have been respect or might have been hatred. Hard to tell. You'll regret this, he said quietly. You have no idea what you've started. I know exactly what I've started. I'm finishing what my grandmother began. Lydia held his gaze. And unlike her, I'm not going to die before I see it through. Harrison left without another word, Caleb scrambling after him. The chamber erupted into chaos again, journalists rushing to file stories, council members arguing, lawyers preparing for the legal battles ahead. Lydia sank into her chair, suddenly exhausted. It wasn't over. Not really. Harrison had too much power, too many connections. This was just the first battle in what would be a long war. But she'd won. For today, she'd won. Roderick collapsed into the seat beside her, all pretense of strength abandoning him. That was stupid. I should be in bed. You look like you're about to pass out. Probably. Worth it, though. He smiled faintly. You were magnificent. I was terrified. Same thing, apparently. Catherine appeared from somewhere in the crowd, took charge immediately. You're going back to the doctor's. Now. Before you bleed through those bandages and ruin this dramatic moment. I'm fine. You're dying. There's a difference. She hauled him to his feet with practiced efficiency. Miss Vance, my cousin's estate is yours to use while this mess gets sorted. It's safer than the city and the staff answers to me now, not him. Thank you, Lydia managed. Don't thank me. Just don't get him killed. He's an idiot, but he's my idiot. Catherine dragged Roderick toward the exit, still muttering about dramatic fools and unnecessary heroics. The crowd thinned gradually. Price stayed to handle official business, Margaret to watch her back. Sarah hovered uncertainly until Lydia pulled her into a quick hug. Thank you for everything, for believing me when no one else did. You would have done the same for me, miss. Would she have? A month ago, Lydia wasn't sure. But now she thought maybe she would. Maybe that's what her grandmother had been trying to teach her all along. Power wasn't just about controlling things. It was about protecting people who needed protection. They left the council chamber as sunset painted the sky orange and gold. The city looked different somehow, still full of Harrison's influence, still dangerous, but no longer insurmountable. What now? Margaret asked. Now I go home. To the estate. Start actually managing the thing I've been fighting to keep. Lydia looked down at the ring on her finger. It still didn't fit quite right. And I figure out how to be the person my grandmother thought I could be. You already are, girl. You just don't know it yet. Maybe. Or maybe she was still learning, still figuring it out as she went. Either way, she wasn't running anymore. Wasn't hiding. Wasn't waiting for someone else to save her. She was Lady Lydia Vance, heir to 40,000 acres, and the woman who'd brought down Harrison Vance's empire. That would have to be enough. 3 months later, Lydia stood in her grandmother's study, her study now, and reviewed reports from the territorial prosecutor. Harrison was on trial for conspiracy and murder. Caleb had fled to another territory and would be extradited if he ever returned. Wickham was dead. The corruption network was being systematically dismantled, one bribed official at a time. It was slow, frustrating. People pushed back constantly, trying to preserve what they could of the old system. But it was happening. Roderick appeared in the doorway, finally moving without visible pain. The infection had nearly killed him, but he'd survived through sheer stubbornness. They'd both survived. "Thought I'd find you here. It's after midnight." "I know, just finishing these." She set down her pen. "The mining operations in the eastern sector are requesting new permits. What do you think?" "I think you should sleep occasionally." "Wild concept, I know." He came in, sat on the edge of her desk. "But if you're asking my opinion, approve them. Those operations employ half the eastern settlement. Denying them means people starve. Even though the owners supported Harrison? Even though you're not your grandmother, Lydia. You don't have to punish everyone who opposed you." It was advice he'd been giving her for months now. Choose your battles, show mercy when you can, build alliances instead of burning bridges. She was trying to learn it, even when her instinct was to fight everything and trust no one. "The alliance papers came through," she said, changing the subject. "Legal recognition of our combined estates. We're officially partners." "Business partners," he clarified. Obviously, they'd had this conversation before. The question of whether their partnership would become something more was still unresolved, still complicated. Lydia wasn't sure she was ready for that, wasn't sure she'd ever be ready after everything. But they had time. For the first time in months, they had actual time to figure things out. "There's a territorial council meeting next week," Roderick said. "They want both of us there, something about new trade regulations." "Thrilling! I can barely contain my excitement. This is your life now. Meetings and regulations and endless paperwork. Better than running for my life through dark forests." Marginally, he stood. "Get some sleep. The territory will still be here in the morning." After he left, Lydia stayed at the desk a while longer, looking at maps and reports and the future she was building. It wasn't what she'd expected, wasn't what she would have chosen if someone had asked her a year ago. But it was hers, hard-won, blood-bought, earned through survival and stubbornness and refusing to let fear make her small. She touched the ring on her finger. It fit better now, or maybe her hands had just gotten used to the weight. Either way, it felt right. Outside her window, the estate stretched into darkness. 40,000 acres of responsibility and possibility. Her grandmother's legacy and her own future tangled together in ways she was still learning to navigate. But she'd figure it out. She always did. Lydia Vance. Not a pawn, not a prize, not anyone's weapon, but her own. Just herself, standing in the wreckage of what she'd destroyed and the beginning of what she was building. It would have to be enough. It was.